So, remember that I made that video on published Reylo fanfics earlier this year, promising at the end that I would be doing a reading vlog of this book for you guys? I'll be posting my video on this book at some point soon, so please stay tuned for that. And then I just never followed through on it. Well, it's December now. My timing is immaculate, as always. And I've made other videos since about literally anything else other than this book. I'm like George R.R. Martin in that way. But I'm not like George, actually, because we're here today. I'm seated. I'm finally here to read this book for you guys after 7 long months. Hi, hello, how are you? My name is Suchi, and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about the stories that I love and clearly anything else that tickles my fancy. And today I'm super excited to be diving into this absolute banger, The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. This is a romantasy that came out in October of last year, and it was marketed as enemies to lovers, set in a Southeast Asian-inspired fantasy world with dragons where light and shadow magic collide. Sounds like some pretty standard romantasy stuff, right? So it's going to be like Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, right? Actually, no. No. To fully understand the reason why I'm like vibrating in my seat about this book right now, we have to take a little trip back in time. Back to December 2019 specifically. In December 2019, my sisters and I walked into a New Jersey theater with a belly full of Korean tofu soup and walked out with our hearts ripped out of our chests. Because in December of 2019, in that theater, I witnessed a train wreck happening in real time. What I mean is, we went to see The Rise of Skywalker, in which my baby boy, Benjamin Chewbacca Solo, why yes, I'm Leia Organa actually, my son Ben Solo was nonsensically killed right in front of my eyes. After spending the entire sequel trilogy building up to his redemption arc and return to the light, my poor girl Rey, she could have lived happily ever after with her mans, but she's just left alone in the desert, literally right back to where she started the trilogy, and that's the last we ever see of her. Honestly, all I remember exiting that theater was wanting J.J. Abrams to pay for my therapy. And also a refund for my movie ticket. Give me back my $14.99, JJ. $19.99 now, if we're adjusting for inflation. I also clearly recall the pin drop silence from everyone that watched it. There were some kids just silently crying as they exited the theater, and they were decidedly not tears of joy, let me tell you that. It was like we'd all just attended the funeral of someone we dearly loved, and in many ways, it was. That tofu soup just sat in our stomachs like rocks, and we all just collectively felt so desolate inside because for real, what did we just watch? Just want to point out, by contrast, when The Last Jedi came out 2 years prior, the energy was real different. People were cheering throughout that runtime, they were chatting excitedly as they left the theater, and they weren't acting like they just watched someone die in their lover's arms. It's just interesting. It needs to be studied, how they destroyed a franchise so completely by pandering to nostalgia and tired old story beats with no real resolution. I also love that after that dumpster fire of a film hit the theaters, the COVID pandemic hit. Tross was an omen of the absolute storm that was to come for us all. Anyway, I was super depressed after that because the sequel trilogy characters, all of them, not just Rey and Kylo Ren, were incredibly important to me, and every single one of them was done dirty in the end. Like, it's actually kind of stunning just how much Lucasfilm lost the plot here. So that same weekend I saw The Rise of Skywalker, I'm like scrolling through Twitter in a mournful haze, and I come across a link to a Tross Fix-It fanfic on AO3 by a user named Diasterisms. I clicked the link, I gobbled up the fic at a truly concerning pace, and then subsequently read every single work this author ever wrote during the week between Christmas and New Year's. And I felt happiness again? From a Star Wars, no less. So Diasterisms, the author of all of these fanfics, happened to be the master of the written word in every sense. I'm so serious. Her prose was just so beautifully lyrical, and the way she wrote Rey and Ben and everyone else just felt like the truest version of those characters that I loved on the big screen. Diasterisms very quickly became one of my favorite authors on God's green earth, even though none of her works were ever displayed in a bookstore. Not yet, anyway. To this day, I tell people that the best Star Wars I've ever experienced was not, in fact, on the big screen with a $200 million budget and fancy VFX. It was typed on a Word doc by a woman in the Philippines who churned out literal masterpieces in the dead of night, in the wee hours of the morning, or whenever she had a free moment. This woman is one Thea Guanzon, and she single-handedly won the Star War. And clearly I wasn't the only one who saw that she had an insane amount of talent, because she was picked up by HarperCollins, one of the biggest publishing houses in the world. And the rest is history. The Hurricane Wars is Thea's debut published novel, and is the first book in a trilogy. The second book, A Monsoon Rising, is actually coming out on the 10th, so I wanted to get my review of this book out to you guys before then, so we can jump right into the second book when it comes out. So, as you can probably guess from the title of this video, the Hurricane Wars trilogy started out as, drumroll please, Reylo fanfic! Yes, the rumors are true. Reylo is the waylo. All the cool girlies are reading published Reylo fanfics these days. All of the major publishing houses are printing books from Reylo authors because that's what sells. It's what the people want. And the Hurricane Wars is no exception. In fact, she was a New York Times bestseller within a couple of weeks of being out in the world. Her power. I read this in its original fanfic form in December 2019. It was called Landscape with a Blur of Conquerors, and it was crack. It was crack. It was pure crack. It was a 350k plus word behemoth of Star Wars excellence. It was basically a retelling of the Star Wars sequel trilogy from the end of The Force Awakens onwards. It took me 3 days straight of non-stop reading to finish it. I got maybe 3 hours of sleep in between, and I'd honestly never been happier reading anything in my life. I don't think I talked to anyone in those 3 days, actually. Physically, I was on my couch in front of my Christmas tree, but mentally, I was like in a galaxy far, far away, devouring this monster of a fanfic and regretting absolutely nothing. It was a life-changing experience, I tell you. So this fanfic, Landscape with a Blur of Conquerors, was turned into the Hurricane Wars trilogy. And so for this video, I'm going to be doing a reading vlog / review of book 1 for you guys. I'll mostly be reading from the Fairy Loot special edition, but I also have the US Barnes & Noble one, and the reason I have both here is because they have different bonus scenes, I believe, which I both love and hate, because on the one hand, I love looking at all the different special editions because their cover art is so goddamn pretty, but on the other hand, I don't love having to pay for like 4 different versions just to be able to read all of the bonus scenes. Like, I wish there was just one deluxe special edition, you know, with all the bonus content in one place, rather than having to hunt down all of the different special editions like their rare Pokemon. But I get it, the publishers want money. But just know that my wallet is crying. But since it's Thea's writing, I regret nothing. Before I dive in, let's take a little second to admire her, okay? This is literally the most beautiful book I own. The purple and gold is a god-tier combination, and these sprayed edges, they haunt my dreams. The covers and end paper art were done by Kelly Chong, aka Afterblossom, legendary Reylo artist for the uninitiated, and I love that she preserved the Reylo energy in this cover, because even though the story doesn't take place in a galaxy far, far away, she clearly hasn't forgotten her roots. These are our main characters. This is Taliesin, my feral angry girl, and Alaric, my shadow daddy son. Look how he's drawn here. He's giving Kylo Ren, but make it K-drama. I love it so much. There's also a map. You know a book is serious when there's a map. Except Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, because that's the most unserious romantasy book to ever exist. I don't even know why it had a map. There wasn't any world building in it. I'm sorry, I know I keep dunking on Fourth Wing, but it's just so easy to do. And so many people have compared the Hurricane Wars to Fourth Wing for some reason, which makes no sense to me as they're vastly different books. Anyway, I'm going to read the synopsis for you guys, but since we're all about remembering where we came from, I'm going to present it to you like this. Taliesin was left on the steps of a Sardovian orphanage as a baby. All she has ever known is the Hurricane Wars, as her people fight for freedom from the tyranny of the Night Emperor Geharis. But are they truly her people? Taliesin dreams of one day finding out where she comes from, her family and the source of the magic that flows through her veins like sunlight. Alaric of House Austenast, master of the Shadowforged Legion and Geharis' only son and heir, has been honed into a weapon by his father. Tasked with obliterating the neighboring Sardovian Allfold, Alaric focuses on only one goal: extinguish all threats to the Night Empire, with his armies and his storm ships and his shadow magic. That is, until he sees Taliesin burning brightly on the battlefield, with the same light magic that slew his grandfather, turned his father into a monster, and ignited the decade-long Hurricane Wars. He tries and fails to kill her, something about her making him pause, allowing his now greatest enemy to slip through his fingers. But a new horror emerges from across the Eversea, one that promises to cause even more devastation than the Hurricane Wars. Only Taliesin and Alaric can stop it. Will these mortal foes be able to come together? Or will they end up destroying each other and dooming their world in the process? Much to think about. I'll be vlogging my thoughts as I read this, so that whole middle section of the video will not be spoiler free. But towards the end, I will include both a spoiler-free and a spoiler-filled review, and I'll mark the timestamps down below for you guys or something, for those of you who haven't read this book yet and don't want me to ruin all the good stuff for you. Also, I love this author, but that doesn't mean I won't give this an honest review. I bought this book with my own money, so I'm not really obliged to give it a falsely glowing review. Therefore, if I end up giving this book 1,000,000 stars, it's because it fully deserves it, and not because I was paid to say so. This video will probably be my longest one yet because she is so thick. Much to unpack here for sure. So why don't you guys get comfortable, get yourselves a nice cozy blanket with a nice little drink of your choice, maybe even an iced mocha latte if we're feeling really bold. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to meet my new children. I'll see y'all on the other side. Hi. Today is Sunday morning. I'm about 20% of the way through this bad boy. I started reading last night and got so sucked in that it was about 2 a.m. before I decided that it was time to call it a night. So a lot happened in the first fifth of this book, I would say, which is not a bad thing, by the way. Like, this is very much a romantasy, but there is a definite emphasis on the fantasy sci-fi aspect, which is great for me because it's always fun to dive into these new worlds and learn all the little quirks and rules. A lot of world building is being done in this first section, but it flows pretty seamlessly through the plot. Like, we're following along with Taliesin and Alaric and seeing the world through their eyes. So I don't feel like I'm being infodumped at all. In fact, I feel like I'm physically there with them, which is what any good book should do, in my opinion. By the way, this book is dual third-person POV, so we get to see what's happening in both Alaric and Taliesin's heads, and I love that for me. I love getting a front row seat to these buffoons descending into increasing levels of madness because they met each other. So the book opens smack dab in the middle of a war, and it also opens with a wedding. We have Taliesin, our main female character, and she's watching her best friend Kaede. I think that's how you pronounce that. Oh, no, never mind. It's Kada. Had to consult the audiobook for that one. I have a sneaking feeling that's going to be a recurring pattern throughout this video, so I apologize in advance if I horrendously butcher the pronunciation of every single name in this book. So Taliesin's best friend Kada is getting married to some guy named Sol, and it's very much like a stolen moment type of situation because they're all soldiers dressed in uniform, and they're in the middle of fighting a war that's been going on for the last decade. The war is going on between two nations, the Sardovian Allfold and Kesseth. Both nations are part of this big continent on this map right here. Kesseth actually used to be part of Sardovia until the war broke out and Kesseth decided to take over the continent. The magic system kind of reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where some people have the ability to manipulate or bend the elements, or dimensions as they're called here. But there's also a little bit of Force mumbo jumbo going on, a little Star Wars flavor thrown in, if you will, because flowing through everyone and everything is something called ether space. Ether is what holds all of reality together and is the source of all of these dimensions. The dimensions are fire, water, air, storm, light, and shadow. There might be others, but that's as far as I've seen. And the people who can manipulate these elements are called ethermancers. There's one type of ethermancer that's different from all of the rest. They're called enchanters. They can manipulate pretty much every dimension, but only if there's an existing source available for them to kind of draw energy from. They can't just organically create their own magic. The other ethermancers, however, can summon magic from within themselves. For example, the Shadowforged can create swords made out of dark energy. So it's like you're either jack of all trades, or you can be master of one. Or you can be master of none, seeing as there's plenty of people who aren't magical at all. I just know that if I had to pick one, I'd be a Shadowforged. In a heartbeat. My magic will be goth just like my soul. So the only ethermancers left on the continent are the enchanters and the Shadowforged. At least that's what most people think. All of the Shadow Forged are from Keseth. They are Kesethese. I like saying that word. It's pleasing to me. And enchanters can pretty much be found anywhere in both Sardovia and Keseth. Before the Hurricane Wars broke out, there also used to be light weavers who, as you can probably guess, can summon light energy. They were from a nation called Sunstead, which was wiped out because they were invaded by Keseth. After Keseth annexed Sunstead and killed all the Lightweavers, the Kesethese king called himself the Night Emperor, and he wanted the shadow to fall over the entire continent. So he invaded every single other nation in the continent that stood in his way. But everything changed when the Night Empire attacked. The lore is that the Lightweavers apparently stormed the Kesethese capital and killed the then king Ozalus. His son Gaheris ascended the throne soon after and went on a murderous rampage against Sunstead and killed all the Lightweavers there. Apparently the other Sardovian kingdoms did nothing to help Keseth while they were being attacked by Sunstead, so Keseth decided to invade the other kingdoms as punishment. And the other kingdoms are quickly falling to the Night Empire because there are no other Ethermencers left to fight the Shadow Forged. Keseth has no one to challenge them, so the rest of the continent is just free real estate. I mean, there are the enchanters, but since they can't summon any magic themselves, I'm not sure how useful they'd be on battlefields. Their skills seem to be more geared towards distilling magic and using it for technological purposes. So basically, dimensional magic is harnessed by the enchanters and is used to power anything from radios to lamps to entire airships. That's right, no more TIE fighters and X-Wings. We fight on airships now because we aren't in space anymore, unfortunately. These airships, and literally anything else in this world, are powered by ether hearts, which are crystals that enchanters use to distill the magic of specific dimensions into, kind of similar to the way a lightsaber is powered by a kyber crystal. Airships are able to fly because they have ether hearts that contain wind magic. Radios can transmit voices and messages using ether hearts containing storm magic, because the storm dimension is the one that produces sound. It's honestly a really interesting combination of fantasy and sci-fi, which is rare to romantasy. Usually these kinds of things are in the background and not really delved into, but I really like that we're going into a lot of detail with how this magic system works and how it affects the world that these characters live in. So going back to the plot, we have Taliesin, who is a Sardovian soldier. She's 20 years old, she has exactly one friend, and she's never been in love, and she's an orphan. But she's also the last Lightweaver remaining on the continent, and nobody but her and the leader of the Sardovian army knows this. So in short, she's a touch-starved, lonely girl who has secret light powers in a steadily darkening world. A truly insane combination of characteristics. I love her already. So she's with the rest of her regiment watching her one and only friend get married. They're in a city called Frostplum, which is covered in ice and snow because they're high up in the mountains. The whole reason that they're here is that this region is one of the last kingdoms of Stardovia that hasn't fallen under the Night Empire's rule. And they're trying to regroup, you know, because it's not looking good for them. The shadows are closing in. They are coming. So the Sardovians are turning to other nations for assistance, but the only one close enough to the continent is the mysterious archipelago called the Nenevar Dominion. Not much is known about Nenevar because they mostly keep to themselves. All anyone knows is that they're an island nation ruled by a queen, they're super rich, and they might have dragons. I feel like if any place has dragons, that place instantly becomes the coolest place in the world. That's just what feels right. So during Kata's wedding, Taliesin overhears that some officers have returned from Nenevar, where they've tried to appeal to the queen there to send them some aid, but she refused. Actually, I think they were refused entry into the capital city itself. They didn't even make it into the palace. They also didn't see any dragons, unfortunately. Maybe they're just a myth after all. And Taliesin's like listening to all this, and something odd sort of stirs within her. In fact, anytime Nenevar is mentioned, she gets this weird sense of déjà vu. Interesting. There's a line that really had me sitting up on my couch and pointing like Leo. I'm gonna read it to you. Something inside her, awakened by the soldier's conversation, tried to fight its way out.
Something inside me has always been there, but now it's awake.
We love to see it. TLJ Bray, you will always be famous. So there's definitely some sort of connection between Taliesin and Nenevar, because she keeps recalling random images that might be memories, or just general feelings of familiarity despite never having been there before in her life. Because Taliesin was dumped at a rundown orphanage in an equally rundown city as a baby, and that's all she's ever known. The city was called Hornbill's Head, which incredible name, by the way. It was a super dirty, desolate slum in the middle of the continent. It was one of those places where the grime sort of sticks to everyone's eyes, and the buildings were built upward rather than spread out. Actually, the description reminds me a lot of Kowloon Walled City. Not sure if that was the actual inspiration for Hornbill's Head, but the resemblance is really kind of uncanny. And Hornbill's Head, like Kowloon Walled City, no longer exists, because when Taliesin was 15, Hornbill's Head was destroyed by something called a storm ship, and that was also the day her Lightweaver powers awakened. Storm ships are a Kesethese invention, and they're basically the reason why this war is called the Hurricane Wars in the first place. They're these massive ships that were powered by thousands of ether hearts, and they unleash hurricanes upon the land. Literally. These gigantic ships are powered by storm magic, so they shoot lightning and tornadoes and thunderstorms out of like cannons. So anytime a storm ship passes through somewhere, that place is completely destroyed, as if a Category 5 hurricane tore right through it. Basically, if you're caught in the path of one of these, you are dead. You are very dead. You are going to wind up dead in a ditch, buried under piles of rubble, which is basically what happened to most people in Hornbill's Head. Storm ships are described as arthropodous and elliptic in shape, which is honestly kind of giving those creepy airships from Howl's Moving Castle. So 15-year-old Taliesin managed to survive the storm ship, but she still couldn't catch a break because Kesethe's soldiers then stormed the place looking to kill literally all the remaining survivors, and one of them found her. She was about to be shot, but that's when she felt a burning under her skin. A blast of literal sunlight exploded out of her and vaporized the Kesethese soldier that was about to kill her. He was nothing but a pile of ash. Iconic. That's the only correct way to take down your enemies. Just evaporate them at an atomic level by turning into the sun. A Sardovian soldier nearby saw the whole thing happen. He saw that Taliesin was the last Lightweaver left, so he took her with him to join the Sardovian army, and she's been fighting the Night Empire with them ever since. But even though she's surrounded by people, she still feels so alone. She's the only Lightweaver left, and she's had to keep that a secret from everyone else. She spent half her childhood in a poorly managed orphanage whose caretakers got physically violent with her whenever they got drunk, which was all the time. So she left and spent the other half of her childhood just out on the streets, fighting tooth and nail just to survive to the next day. And then she joined the Sardovian army, but it was really hard to make connections with anyone because they're all just too busy fighting for their lives. They have no time for friendship. She's had it rough, to put it mildly. She is like Rey in a lot of ways. She grew up in a desolate place waiting for a family that never came back, and leaves that place to fight a war among people who become her friends but still can't relate to her on a fundamental level. But there's someone out there who still can.
I do.
So as Taliesin watches Keda get married, she feels oddly hollow, like she's happy for her best friend, but also wonders what it would like to be held like that, or kissed by someone who loves her, because she's just never had that in life. And unfortunately, she probably won't get the chance to find out anytime soon, or will she? Because the Night Empire ambushes them out of nowhere. Keseth was just salty that they didn't get an invite, and clearly decided to crash this wedding. So everyone rushes off to the airships. Taliesin keeps her eyes peeled for a storm ship because if the Kesethes have brought one of those, they're done. They're as good as dead. So there's this big airship battle between Sardovians and Kesethes. One thing about Thea, she's a master at describing fight scenes. Whether they're lightsaber duels or airship battles in this case, she really does have a way of immersing you in the scene. It's cinematic, I guess, is the best way to describe it. Like, I can easily picture what's going on in these battles as if I was watching it on screen, which is honestly hard to convey through writing, but that's always been one of Thea's strengths. So Taliesin is a decent helmsman. Our girlie takes out a fair number of Kesethese ships, but there's just too many of them and her vessel gets shot down. She crash lands in a snow-covered forest pretty far from the main battle, and the quickest way back is across a frozen lake. But just as she sets foot on the ice, the darkness comes for her. A shadow-forged legionnaire blocks her path. He conjures up these shadow barriers around her that essentially trap her out on the ice, because if you touch those shadow barriers, side effects include grievous bodily harm or death. So Taliesin has no weapons on her. Her only choice is to use her secret Lightweaver abilities against this Shadowforged soldier, or die by his hand out on this frozen lake. She makes her choice pretty quickly. She conjures up a couple of daggers out of pure, burning sunlight, and they have it out Taliesin manages to fell this dark beast, and she's about to deliver a killing blow, but before she can plunge her light dagger into his chest, she's blocked by the shadow weapon of another legionnaire. She's like sent reeling backwards, and she looks up and sees she's face to face with Alaric Osenast, Crown Prince of Keseth, heir to the Night Empire throne, master of the Shadowforged Legion. This Prince of Darkness is staring her down, and he looks like something straight out of her worst nightmare. Or is it a daydream? He's dressed in all black, head to toe in full armor, wearing clawed gauntlets. He's got this half mask covering most of his face, which has rows of sharp teeth on it. He's got black hair and ice cold, silver eyes lit by the light of the 7 moons above. Just the shadow daddiest of them all. Kylo Ren would be so proud. I love him so much already. That's my son right there. By the way, she's never actually seen Alaric in person before this. The only reason she knows that this is the prince is the fact that he's wearing the symbol of the royal house on his armor, which is a chimera. Alaric's just kind of like watching her. Very much predator, prey kind of vibes. And then he just lunges at her with like a war scythe made out of shadows. Taliesin is terrified out of her wits. My girl's giving it all she's got. She's conjuring her light swords because she's not dying today. There's also the fact that like her secret is out now. The literal Prince of Keseth now knows that there's a light weaver out there, and there's no way he's going to let her live. So she just has no choice but to fight her way out. So they're like clashing light against dark across this frozen lake in this snowy forest. And yes, I've seen this movie before. And you know what? I didn't really like the ending, but I have hope for this one. Anyway, this scene is such a fun twist on Rey and Kylo's duel in the snow. I think a lot of the dynamics are the same. Taliesin is scared shitless, but is a crazy feral gremlin at the same time. She's not going down without a fight. She's absolutely channeling this energy right here. Alaric is interesting here because he's almost toying with her. He's parting the shadow barriers around them so that Taliesin doesn't run into them, even though that would probably incapacitate her a lot more quickly if he just left them up. He's relentlessly attacking her, but it seems like it's more to test her limits rather than to truly kill her. At least at first, because then she starts really fighting back, and then it gets real serious. These two are just straight up trying to off each other from this mortal plane. You know how I just said that Taliesin is a feral goblin? Yeah, so she can't seem to summon a shield with her light powers. She's having trouble blocking Alaric's attacks, so she just kind of slams her forehead into his, just concusses him. That's her brilliant plan to deter him from killing her. Just no regard for the fact that doing so will also give her a concussion. She's so stupid. I love her so much. She also manages to stab him in the shoulder with her light dagger, and that incapacitates him long enough for her to run away. She's bleeding from their duel. She has a splitting headache, but she still can't rest because the Sardovians are retreating. Everyone's evacuating Frostplum because the Night Empire has won this battle. There were just too many shadow daddies this time. So remember how Taliesin's best friend Kata was marrying a guy named Sol? Well, Sol is dead. Yeah, he was killed in battle on the night of his wedding, leaving behind his wife and unborn child. Yeah, Kata's also pregnant. I don't know if I mentioned that. So it was a shotgun wedding. So that's depressing. The mood's pretty somber. Sardovia's lost a lot of ground with this defeat. And there were also a lot of lives lost, including the groom of this wedding that everyone just attended. Taliesin can't even bring herself to cry because she's just so burnt out with everything going on, just fighting a losing war. And the thing with her is that she's been fighting her whole life, even before the Hurricane Wars began. The Sardovians retreat to one of their last remaining military bases, and Taliesin's immediately summoned by the Amarante, which is the fancy name for the leader of the Sardovian army. 2 things about the Amarante. 1, she's a woman. 2, she's actually from Keseth. Like, she's one of the shadow daddies and everything. She has darkness powers. It's not clear why she left Keseth and joined Sardovia. Like, we're not told what made her want to leave, what is unfortunately the winning side in this war. But for all intents and purposes, she is a certified baddie. She wants Sardovia to be free and not live under the Night Empire's tyranny. Her name is Edith Vela. She defected to Sardovia about a decade ago with some others and stole a bunch of storm ships along the way. So because of that, Sardovia has been able to fight the Night Empire for as long as it has, but now they're quickly running out of options. So Edith Vela wants Taliesin to go to Nenevar. Remember how I said earlier that the Sardovians had gone there to try and get the queen there to help them, but failed? Yeah, so they didn't come back completely empty-handed. So in this world's lore, there are tears in the fabric of reality where certain types of ether magic just flow freely. These are called severs. They're located all over the world. These are those external sources of magic I was talking about earlier that enchanters can draw from. So for example, a Shadow Forged can create their own dark magic, but an enchanter has to physically go to a Shadow Sever to harness that same magic. While these Sardovians were on Nenevar, they noticed a light sever unleashing on one of the islands. This is significant because there are no light severs left on the continent. Keseth destroyed them all. It's basically this colossal pillar of light that explodes into existence and then winks out at random points in time. Severs can be used to amplify your powers, and since Sardovia is literally on its last legs, Taliesin is their last hope. She's the lone light standing against this darkness, just a single candle standing out there against the night. So Edith Vela wants Taliesin to sneak into Nenevar, commune with the light sever, and get out unnoticed by anyone. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Asking a girl to visit a mysterious land she's never been to, that's rumored to be prowling with dragons, and is unfriendly to outsiders? No big deal. I'm sure that won't blow up in your face whatsoever. By the way, the book is fully aware of how bonkers this idea is, because Kata literally asks her these same questions when Taliesin tells her about the plan. But Taliesin agrees to go, firstly because the fight against Alaric rattled her. She has to up her game if they're all going to live. She spends an interesting amount of time reliving her Frozen Lake duel with Alaric, by the way. How it was almost like he was going easy on her, but also how there was this sort of strange magnetism between them. How the way his moonlit silver eyes focused only on her. Oh girly, that is a slippery slope right there. But Taliesin also wants to go to Nenevar because she's curious. She wants to know why she feels such a pull towards a place she's never been to. Before Taliesin leaves, Kata pulls her aside and goes, "Okay, but all jokes about dragons gobbling you up aside, there's definitely something weird going on in those islands." Kata's from the southern coast, and she grew up hearing the story of the Fisherman's Warning, which is a strange purple glow appearing in the sky at random points. The seas turn really rough, and all the fish they catch is either inedible or basically non-existent for months at a time. Basically, if you live near this coast, your life sucks for a while whenever this happens. And it only happens like once in a millennia, but every time it did, the purple lights always seem to be coming from Nenevar. So like, try not to die, bestie. I like Kata. We don't get too many scenes with her, but she's so refreshingly brash. She's also a pregnant grieving widow, and also a soldier. She contains multitudes. We love to see it. There's this one line where Taliesin's looking at Kata while she's burying her dead husband, and she just thinks to herself, "Thank the gods I will never love someone that much." And is this foreshadowing? Because honey, I think you've got a big storm coming. I have this disease where I think I'm hilarious, but in reality, people are just laughing at me and not with me at any given time. And then Taliesin sets sail for Nenevar in her tiny little airship. We get Alaric's POV next, and you'll never guess who he's thinking about at this time. Our boy Alaric is in a bit of a conundrum. He knows he has to kill the girl who's occupying his thoughts. As the last Lightweaver, she's a direct threat to the Night Empire, and as long as she's alive, she's always going to be that symbol of hope for the Sardovians. But also the girl is occupying his thoughts. And he's frustrated because he hasn't seen her since that battle out on the ice. He and some of his legionnaires are currently destroying the remnants of a light sever because, again, they're shadow daddies. They hate the light, they 100% committed to that goth aesthetic, and I have to respect that. Alaric's like the master of the Shadow Forged army, but he's got his own little boy band that goes wherever he goes. Like his own little Knights of Ren, if you will. Actually, there are two girls in this boy band. They're twin sisters, and then there's Severame, who is his certified bestie for life. Severame is the chillest shadow daddy ever, and there's two things he loves more than anything else in the world: annoying Alaric within an inch of his life, and being a ladies' man. Severame's like flirting with the twins, and Alaric's just standing there long-sufferingly tolerating their antics. Severame is the charming Bingley to Alaric's dark, brooding Darcy. That's it. That's their dynamic in a nutshell. Here's why I love Alaric despite being only like 20% through this book. There's a point where the twins are like, "We should blast this mountain." That would destroy this lightsaber for good. And Alaric goes, no, because there's a village at the base and blasting the mountain would kill everyone in it. The twins are like, who cares about them? Your father doesn't. They're just a bunch of worthless Sardovians. But Alaric, my boy, he goes, but they're not Sardovians anymore. They're Kessithese. There are people now. And also, I'm not my daddy. Sorry. Let's talk about his daddy for a minute. His name is Geharis, and his interests include mercilessly killing anyone who doesn't agree with him, and also inflicting bodily harm on his son whenever he displeases him. Yeah, apparently when he found out Alaric failed to kill Taliesin, he punished him so hard that he couldn't get up for days afterward. And this was on top of Alaric already being injured and concussed from fighting Taliesin. I want Geharis to die a painful death. We haven't even met him yet, by the way. But that's where I'm at with this man. Anyway, Alaric and his boy band get a note from a messenger bird sent by a turncoat in the Sardovian army, basically saying that the Lightweaver is headed for Nenevar because she wants to access the lightsaber there, and also that her name is Taliesin. Well, Alaric can't let that happen, so he rushes off to follow her, just leaves his boy band behind with all the grunt work while he chases off some girl to the edge of the world, purely to kill her, no other reasons. And the whole journey there, he's like, Taliesin, her name is Taliesin. This girl lives rent-free in his mind, but he can't possibly fathom why. It must be because she's a Lightweaver, and everyone in Kessith knows that Sunstead attacked first. The Lightweavers are monsters, and they're the ones who started the Hurricane Wars. Yes, that's it. That's what all the Kessithese think anyway. Meanwhile, the Sardovians claim it's the other way around, that Kessith started the wars by attacking Sunstead. So what is the truth? Hopefully, we'll find out. A couple days go by, Taliesin reaches Nenevar. The islands are described thus: embedded in deep blue waters, like beads of jade scattered carelessly on a bed of sapphire silk. Just what in the Windows XP background is this? And when can I move there? Nenevar is basically fantasy Philippines. I have never been to the Philippines myself, but I have some Filipino friends, and it's because of them that I can confidently say we need more fantasy worlds inspired by the Philippines. You'll understand why as we go along here. Taliesin's just kind of taking it all in as she flies over Nenevar. This place has been calling to her, and that call has just been getting louder the closer she gets. It feels like Nenevar was waiting for her. And isn't that strange when she's never been there before? And then all of a sudden she sees a strange violet light explode into the sky. It's the same one from the story Kato was telling her earlier about the fisherman's warning. So apparently it's not just some disembodied purple glow in the sky. Upon a closer look, it's actually some sort of magical sever. But this is weird to Taliesin because there are no severs that give off purple light apparently. She doesn't know what kind of magic this is. She's definitely never seen anything like this on the continent. I just want to point out the combination of the vivid descriptions of the islands and like the purple skies here really just gives a tropical Lisa Frank. And what an aesthetic. I don't think I've seen too many high fantasies with this vibe, but I love it. It speaks to the 90s vaporwave kid in me. Taliesin stashes her airship in a cave to avoid being seen. She treks up the mountain to reach the lightsaber. This is where she really gets immersed in the sights and sounds of the jungle. She discovers humidity, so that's fun. There's a bunch of interesting flora and fauna. There's carnivorous plants everywhere, which I greatly enjoyed reading about because I love plants that can bite you. She also sees some tarsier monkeys, and they can disappear into thin air apparently. Don't know what that's about. And neither does Taliesin. That's definitely not on her list of normal things animals can do. So she decides maybe she's had enough of foreign jungles for one day. Maybe we should call it a night, you know? She's sweating out too many electrolytes out here. It's making her lightheaded. She falls asleep and dreams of a woman she doesn't know hugging her, calling her by another name. But then when she wakes up, she can't remember what that name was. Yeah, the whole journey to this lightsaber is just Taliesin thinking she's going mad because she can't shake the feeling that she's been here before. Just a severe case of deja vu that lasts for hours. And when she reaches the lightsaber, guess who's waiting for her? Yeah, our favorite goth prince just chased her all the way here to this random mountaintop just so he could kill her and enjoy the view at the same time. What view are we talking about here, by the way? The Lightweaver or the mountaintop? God only knows, because Alaric sure as hell doesn't. The banter here is incredible. They start dueling again. Talison's so incredibly angry that he's followed her here, and he's just like amused, but in a haughty, stuck-up kind of way, which just makes her even more mad. He's like, I see you've been practicing. And she's like, are you seriously trying to compliment me right now? We're literally trying to kill each other. And he's like, oh, that wasn't a compliment. You're just more interesting to duel now. Okay, sure, Jan. So the Lightsaber is located in the ruins of an abandoned shrine, and because they're just blasting light and shadow powers at each other, they're kind of trashing the place.
What did you two do? You've ruined the ruin!
Alaric somehow pins Taliesin to the ground, but before he can deliver the killing blow, their powers leave them. Yeah, their ethermancy just kind of vanishes into the ether. And they're suddenly surrounded by a troop of Nenevarine soldiers who fire bolts of purple energy at them, and the next thing they know, they're waking up in a prison cell somewhere. Taliesin opens her eyes, and the first thing she sees is Alaric Ostanas's bare face for the first time. And her brain sort of grinds into a halt. Waves of disheveled black hair framed pale, angular features dotted with beauty marks. He had a long nose and a sharp jawline, the overall harshness alleviated by a pair of soft, full lips. Okay, Adam Driver. This entire scene is channeling this energy. I love it so much. Oh, and his voice is low, a little hoarse. Makes her think of rough silk and honey mead in an oaken barrel. What imagery? Oh my god. But then he starts actually speaking, and he's so snippy and caustic that the spell is just immediately broken, and she's back to being mad at him again. He taunts her, she taunts him. They start going at each other's throats with just their hands this time, because they still can't summon their magic. It's like been turned off somehow. Alaric pins her down again. And that's when a Nenevarine officer chooses to show up. Even this guy sees them and goes, am I interrupting something? Like, why am I always finding you two in this position? If I had a gold coin for every time I've seen Alaric on top of you, I'd have 2 gold coins, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. This book is a romance and a fantasy, but it's also a rom-com, actually. Taliesin is led away and interrogated. We find out that the reason her powers are mysteriously gone is because of birds. They're called Sarimans, they're native to Nenevar, and they have the power to suppress athermancy within a certain range. Some of those birds are being held in cages nearby, so that's why she can't use her powers at this moment. Yeah, it seems like the Nenevarine people are kind of afraid of athermancy. Apparently the only power they recognize is the queen's, and magic represents a direct threat to the monarchy. So the only athermancers in Nenevar are enchanters. All the others left centuries ago because they didn't want their magic suppressed. According to this officer anyway. We also find out that the purple magic she and Alaric were knocked out with is actually yet another type of dimension. It's called the Voidfell. It's only found here on Nenevar, and it's death magic. Whatever it touches dies instantly, but it can be calibrated to only stun rather than kill, so they were lucky that one time. Then this guy asked Taliesin a couple of interesting questions. He asks her if she knows someone named Hanan Ivralis. He also asks her how old she is and who her parents are. She tells him that she doesn't know who her parents are because she's an orphan and that she's 20 years old. By the way, from the time they met, this officer has been kind of looking at her funny, like he knows her from somewhere, but when he hears her answers to his questions, his composure just completely slips. And then the Prince of Nenevar walks into the room, demanding to know why he's been summoned in the middle of the succession debate to a random jungle outpost, and then he looks at Taliesin. And it's like he's seen a ghost. His jaw fully drops to the floor because that's his daughter right there. Okay, I'm gonna call it a day here for this vlog and continue reading this book. I'll catch you guys later when I've gotten a little bit further. Bye. Hi. We have a lot to unpack. It's the next day. Yes, I'm an outfit repeater. Yes, it's true, I only own 3 shirts. That's my lore. But first, I'm going to show this movie poster for no reason at all. So we have Prince Elagby. He is the only son of the current Dragon Queen of Nenevar, Urduha of House Silim, first of her name, ruler of the Andals and the Roinar and the First Men. Or rather, Prince Elagby is the only remaining son of the queen. More on that later. Queen Urduha currently is in a bit of a pickle because she is the queen of a country that only recognizes female power. which we must stand because the Nenevarine are the cheetah girls of this world. Girl power and all that. Nenevar is a matriarchal monarchy, which means that only women can inherit the dragon throne. If a queen only has sons, her son's wife becomes the first in line to the throne. I think it's the same for the nobility as well. So in Nenevar, you really want to have female descendants because they will continue your line forward, not your sons. Incredibly iconic of them, it has to be said. All of the best fictional places are matriarchal societies. Alderaan, Naboo, Nenevar. So Queen Urduha never had any daughters. She had 2 sons. The older one led a rebellion against her and never got married. The younger one, however, did get married, and he was the one who killed his brother and quashed said rebellion. The younger son is our Prince Elagby here, and 20 years ago, he and his wife Hanan Ivralis had a girl. They named their daughter Aluncina Ivralis. Remember, matriarchal society? Aluncina Ivralis was destined to be Queen Urduha's heir, but Aluncina disappeared just after she turned a year old. Basically, she and her grandmother, the queen, were evacuated from a palace during the older son's rebellion because that man was out for blood apparently, so he was planning to kill both his mom and his niece. For their safety, they were put on 2 separate airships. The queen's ship returned to the palace after the rebellion was quashed, but Aluncina's never did. They tried to locate the ship, but its radio signal went dark, so everyone assumed she died. This put the future reign of Urduha's family in jeopardy because she was now a queen without any female heirs. She had no granddaughter, and her one daughter-in-law, Aluncina's mother, had already died a few months before from some sort of illness, so she was all out of options. And all of this was like 20 years ago. So I'm surprised that Urduha was able to hold on to power for as long as she's done without having any official heirs. I guess people were expecting Prince Elagby to get married again or something, but he never did. So here we are in the present day. The nobility are really starting to make noise about whether Urduha should even be queen anymore because she's older than Sin and has no heirs. So Prince Elagby was unceremoniously summoned to this random jungle outpost, and he's all annoyed and huffy about it, but he realizes why when he sees Talisin's face. She is the spitting image of Hanan Ivralis, his late wife. She's also an orphan who was 20 years old, just like Aluncina Ivralis would have been if she'd lived, and she's a light weaver. Hanan Ivralis had also been a light weaver. The only light weaver Nenevar had seen in generations, in fact. So there are just way too many things lining up for this to be just a coincidence. So Prince Elagby just runs with it. He's like shaking and crying. He's so overcome with all of these emotions, calling Talisin his daughter. And Talisin's just like, what? I'm sorry, I'm your what?
Me? A princess? Shut up!
When he calls her Aluncina, that's when she really steps back and goes, okay, time out, there's no way I can be your princess. Basically, Talisin's been dreaming of this moment her whole life. Not the princess part. That was absolutely not what she'd imagined growing up dirt poor as an orphan in Kowloon walled city. Sorry, Hornbill's head. My bad. No, she'd had more humble aspirations. She dreamed of reuniting with a family that loved her. That was all. The throne and tiara were thrown in there as just added perks, you know? I'll take it. But Talisin's mad, and rightly so, because her real family being royalty makes her upbringing worse. It means she was dumped at that orphanage because they didn't want her. But Elagby, really earnestly I might add, he explains the whole backstory with the rebellion and the fact that her airship had just disappeared. They'd done everything to find her, but never did. We, as in us the readers, don't know why her airship disappeared, or what it was doing in the middle of Sardovia of all places, but it's clear that her family never actually intended to abandon their only heir. So Elagby gets super emotional. He's telling her how it's been 20 years since he's seen her, but he still knows it's her deep down. Like he knows in his heart that she's his daughter, and that he'd always hoped that she was alive out there somewhere, because he loves her. I like that the officer here is just like, whoa, your highness, don't get too excited. We have to make sure it's really her. But Elagby's just like, yeah, do your little fact check. I know it's her. I just do. I'm her daddy. Not for long though, I'm just saying. I'm sorry, don't cancel me for this. Speak of the devil. This tearful family reunion is cut short because Alaric bursts out of prison, knocks a bunch of guards out, and steals an airship and escapes. Taliesin follows him along with the prince and the other guards. Alaric is like throwing shadow weapons at them because he's far enough away from the bird cages that his magic is coming back to him. The guards fire those purple Voidfell cannons, and this time they're calibrated to kill, not just stun. Taliesin, however, is about to be caught in the crossfire along with Alaric. So they both like hurl their magic at the Voidfell cannon fire that's coming towards them, and then something weird happens. Their shadow and light magic combines to form something entirely new. It forms a weirdly colored shield that blocks the Voidfell magic entirely. The death magic actually just completely disappears when it comes into contact with their combined shield. It's like the cannons were never fired in the first place. Oh, okay, so our enemies are stronger together. A power like life itself, light and dark combining into something that can stop even death? I love this song. Anyway, everyone's jaw kind of just drops. They're just standing there in shock. They've clearly never seen anything like this before. Alaric runs off. He steals one of the Nenevarine airships, and Taliesin follows him by stealing another airship. It's fine. She's the princess, isn't she? It's technically hers anyway. Alaric and Taliesin get into a dogfight with their stolen Nenevarine airships. I love it. It's very reminiscent of those starship battle scenes back in the Star War, except with the added delicious banter via the airship radios. They're just taunting each other the whole time through the receivers. These idiots love to yap while killing each other, by the way. It's incredible. These airships are unlike anything from the continent because they have those cannons that shoot the purple Voidfell magic. So yeah, they're literally hurling death magic at each other while arguing back and forth on the radio. Alaric ends up getting away, but he kind of realizes the deep shit he's in. He's failed to kill the Lightweaver again. And now Nenevar knows the Prince of the Night Empire encroached on their borders and stole one of their airships. So yeah, his dad's probably going to punish him severely again. I don't understand his dad's reasoning for hurting his son to the point where he needs serious medical attention. Like, why are you almost killing your only heir whenever he does something you don't like? We'll come back to him later. I have thoughts on this man. So Taliesin flies back to the island to return the airship that she stole, but also because she's conflicted. Should she stay and claim her title? Should she embrace her newfound family and become their princess? Or should she go back to fighting a losing war? Ultimately, Taliesin is a girly with integrity, and she decides the Sardovians need her more. They're the only family she's ever known, and those bonds have been forged in fire. Or storms, so to speak. Couldn't be me, I would have hightailed it to the palace immediately. Hey Granny, it's me, your long-lost granddaughter. Yes, I'm ready to be the Princess of Genovia now. Taliesin's also low-key afraid that they maybe will do an investigation and find out that she's not in fact the princess. So there's the fear of rejection there. Happens to the best of us, but I say fake it till you make it. She decides that once the Hurricane Wars are over, and if she's still alive by then, that's when she'll come back. So she returns to the continent. A true patriot. What else is there to say? Taliesin tells Edith Vela and Kada everything that just happened, the fact that Alaric had ambushed her, and that she's actually the long-lost princess of Nenevar. She's had a truly wild few days in hindsight. Despite Taliesin being the princess of Nenevar, Vela still thinks that asking the queen will be a lost cause. They're just too isolationist. So Sardovia is just gonna be on its own for the rest of the war. And the war, it ends within like a month of all this happening. Yeah, I thought that was a little fast, but not surprising given how Keseth was just obliterating everything in its path the whole time. The Night Empire launched a massive attack on the Sardovian capital. They brought in their storm ships and flattened the whole city. The whole place looked leveled, like a hurricane tore through it. So there's thousands of dead civilians and soldiers alike. There's piles of rubble everywhere. And to add to the whole dystopian effect, one of the 7 moons in the sky is actually in eclipse, and it's a red eclipse, so the whole sky just looks drenched in blood. Edith Vela is actually drenched in blood. She's been injured by one of the Shadow Forged, and Taliesin and the others are trying to get her to safety. Actually, they're all just evacuating. They know they'll be slaughtered if they stay because Emperor Gaheris is a genocidal maniac and wants all the Sardovians dead. So Taliesin's helping to carry Edith Vela, but our favorite co-ed boy band shows up. Yes, the gang's all here. Chill Boy Severine, those deranged twin girls. Taliesin stays and fights them off while the others evacuate to the airships. But before any of them can land a single blow on her, our baby boy shows up to the party. I'm so sorry. It's just the song has kind of become Alaric's theme on the internet, and it's the greatest thing ever. Thea, if you're somehow watching this, we will never let you live this down. This is your legacy now. He tells his boy band, all dark and menacing, find your own plaything. I have a score to settle with this one. Cinema. He starts fighting Taliesin. They're going at each other, light against dark. Awash in the red light of the whole eclipse. There's destruction everywhere. This is such a crazy visual. Thea really does excel at writing fight scenes that are interlaced with underlying tension without it feeling like a chore to read. It's literary excellence. To me, they read like those Kylo Ren and Rey lightsaber fights, which is great because I loved all of their duels in the movies. Alaric is trying to get Taliesin to yield. He actually calls her by her name for the first time, which gets her looking like this. The way her name sounds in his smooth, low voice. Girl, I get it. He's almost pleading with her to yield because the war is already lost. But she's like, even if I do, would you let me live? Because we both know your dad won't. And he just has no answer to that, which in itself says it all. In all the kerfluffle, a pillar gets knocked over and is about to crash into Taliesin. At this point, she still can't make a shield, by the way, so all she can do is just hurl a light spear at it. But Alaric throws a shield in front of her, to her very great shock, and their magic combines to that super powerful barrier again. Taliesin is like, did you just save my life? Alaric, though, is fascinated by what they just did, so he goes, come with me. We can study this magic together. He's all blushy when he says this, like his ears are turning red and everything. Oh, my son. But Taliesin's just looking at him like he's gone insane, and maybe he has because he snaps out of it immediately and then just turns around and leaves her there. Taliesin's just standing there stunned, wondering what the hell just happened. But Alaric just goes, the war is lost already, so killing you now would be a waste of my energy. Also, you'll probably die in the retreat anyway, so why bother? Interesting. Interesting that Alaric is aware that she'll probably be killed trying to evacuate, yet he doesn't feel inclined to speed up the process and kill her himself. It's almost like he doesn't want her to die. Actually, I think they're approaching one of my favorite parts of the ETL trope, where the enemies start to realize that the person they want to kill is also the person that makes their life so exciting, and if that person dies, they just won't have that anymore. Maybe life is more fun when you have that worthy opponent that you're always on the lookout for. Also, interesting that Alaric and Taliesin are only able to create that magic barrier together. Like, Taliesin tried to recreate it with Edith Vela. Remember, because Edith Vela is a Shadow Daddy too, but it didn't work. Don't know what that's about, but smells like fate. Like destiny. So Taliesin and the Sardovians. That makes it sound like the rival girl group, the Alaric's boy band of shadow daddies. The Sardovians escaped the capital with just a fraction of their former fleet. What remains of the army has been scattered in all different directions, and they're scrambling around trying to find somewhere safe. But the problem is, the entire continent has now fallen to Kesseth, so they literally have nowhere to go. Taliesin comes up with a brilliant idea. Go to Nenevar and appeal to the Dragon Queen for sanctuary. Just stroll right on in there and go, hey Granny, since you've missed 99% of my birthdays, can you just give me this one giant birthday present of allowing me and my friends to crash at your palace for a little while? We need to hide from the ghoulish wraiths on the continent who are out to get us. So everyone reluctantly agrees because they literally have no other options. Taliesin's group has only a handful of ships and one storm ship, and they're just hovering over the open sea at the moment, trying to figure out where all the others are. They're searching across radio frequencies, trying to locate the other ships because the evacuation was just so scattered. Then there are lots of people unaccounted for, including Kada. Yeah, Kada, who is pregnant, is missing. She hasn't been seen on any of the other ships out there that they've contacted, which is concerning. Taliesin is worried sick. Days pass, but no word from her friend. She's just MIA. So their group heads for Nenevar, and they send a message to the border patrol to ask for an audience with the queen, and also that they have their long-lost princess with them. Can't leave that part out. But Nenevar takes a full 2 business days to respond. Taliesin's just oh, I guess they decided I'm not their princess after all. That's kind of embarrassing. And also a death sentence because now the Shadow Daddies are going to find us. But then a message comes through on the radio telling them they may approach the Queen's flagship. We're saved! Hopefully. So they fly through the islands, and Talison's getting that weird sense of deja vu again. But this time she's fairly certain it's because she's actually been here before. The Queen's flagship is actually just a massive floating castle. Just whole towers of stone and stained glass windows, just hovering in the sky above the ocean. Just an insane visual. I'm obsessed with the whole aesthetic. Taliesin sees this and goes, well, okay, Moneybags. Why didn't you tell me sooner that I was the princess? And then there were dragons. Yes, dragons. There were 2, and I'm sure there are many more. They are enormous, bigger than any storm ship, and come roaring out of the sea and the sky. And if I were Taliesin, I would have burst into tears of joy. Because dragons are real. The way they move reminds me of that one Atla episode, the one with the Sun Warriors. These particular dragons are even red and blue, so I thought that was a nice Easter egg. I love the description of how they affect the environment. Like, this is what happens when they fly out of the sea. The dawn air swelled with the sense of plankton and overturned seabed, of the rotten wood of shipwrecks and the soft things that lived and died in them, there in the black depths where sunlight couldn't reach. Cinema! Everyone is stunned because, again, dragons are real. But Taliesin actually feels a little sad. If Nanavar had agreed to help Sardovia, they probably would have won the war. Because they have dragons. These 2 particular dragons are just hovering menacingly on either side of the floating castle, just giving the Sardovians the bombastic side-eye, ready to devour them if they set a single toe out of line. I guess Urdaha really is the Dragon Queen. Welcome back to Daenerys Targaryen, but Fantasy Filipino edition. We love to see it. Edith Vela, who, if you recall, was stabbed in the stomach during the last battle, accompanies Taliesin on the flagship. She's just like limping along, nearly doubling over in pain, but she powers through because she's a soldier first and foremost. I love that Edith Vela is like, I'll do all the talking. Because Taliesin, you can be a tad hot-headed. Just a tad. But it's also because she understands the kind of woman that Queen Urduha must be if she's held on to power for this long without an heir. Ilagbi greets them inside the floating castle. He's super happy to see Taliesin again. He thanks Edith Vela for taking care of his daughter all these years. He's just like a charming prince. He's friendly and warm, and his mother, the queen, is decidedly not. In fact, she's literally wearing a crown that looks like it's been carved out of ice. That's how stone cold she is. Her whole vibe is something else. She's bejeweled to the max. She's wearing like diamonds on the tips of her lashes. Her nails are like stiletto cones. A lot is happening here with Queen Urduha. The first thing she says when she sees Taliesin is, "You're right, Prince Ilagbi. She does look like your dead wife." Girl, this is your granddaughter? Yeah, for all the Princess Diaries energy this book is giving, I'm not sure we're channeling Clarice and Mia here, because Clarice was nice. So Urduha gets straight to the point. She does not want to get involved in another foreign war. She initially refuses to grant the Sardovians sanctuary. She claims that Taliesin's mother Hanan had gone behind her back to send Nenevarine airships to aid Sunstead in their fight against Keseth 20 years ago, but it badly backfired and everyone was killed. So none of those ships returned to Nenevar. So yeah, she's clearly salty about that. Taliesin pleads with her grandmother. She's like, "I'll do whatever you want, but please let us hide within your borders because the Night Empire will kill us." And that's when Urduha gives a little knowing smirk because Taliesin has walked right into her trap. Urduha goes, "There's a super remote island on the far side of Nenevar called the Storm God's Eye. That's where our Storm Dimension Sever is located. The winds and seas are always rough there, and hardly anyone even knows it exists. Your Sardovian friends can hide there. I'll provide them with food and supplies. No one but my inner circle and the Navy will know about it. But you, Alencina, you'll stay in the capital with me and be our princess." So there's the catch, which makes Edith Vela really mad. She's pretty sure Urduha had planned to coerce her granddaughter into becoming the princess from the very beginning. She like rounds on Prince Ilagbi here. She's like, "Did you know about this?" And he's like, "No, I swear I didn't. I'm just happy to have my daughter back." Protect him at all costs. Taliesin, meanwhile, is really scared. She's being forced to enter a whole new unknown territory, being royalty. But this is the only way to save her friends, so she sucks it up and agrees to be the princess. And so the Sardovians live to see another day. Meanwhile, Alaric has been scanning the seas looking for the remnants of the Sardovian fleet, but no avail because they're all in Nenevar. But his mind keeps looping back to his last interaction with Taliesin. He's wondering why he even let her go alive in the first place. It's obviously because he felt sorry for her. And he's wondering if she's still alive, just out there somewhere. Interesting. His father summons him back to the Kessethes capital, and as Alaric's flying over the continent, he sees the scale of destruction that their storm ships caused. Like, these used to be bustling cities and green fields, but now there's just rubble and a sea of dead corpses. He wonders, briefly, if it had all been worth it. If winning the war justified all this devastation. Oh, okay. I see you there, Prince Zuko. Actually, on that topic, we finally meet Gaheris. He is basically a ghoul with like a death rattle for a voice. Apparently he'd done a lot of magical experiments on himself to become more powerful, and they took a toll on his appearance. He's only like 50, but he looks like he's 500. At one point, Alaric looks at his dad and wonders if he'll suffer the same fate one day, because his dad looks so washed. Gaheris is clearly the big baddie of the book. He's disappointed in his son for letting the Sardovians and the Lightweaver get away, and y'all know what that means. Torture is on the menu for Alaric Osanes tonight. Gaheris names Alaric Emperor that same afternoon. So yeah, Alaric ascends the throne. He is now Night Emperor. But I have a feeling it's not because Gaheris wants to retire or step aside. I think he just wants to make more nefarious plans in the dark and hand over the busy work of ruling to his son. So, to recap, Taliesin is forced to become the Princess of Nenevar to save her Sardovian friends. Alaric is made Night Emperor. And then we get a bit of a time jump. A few months go by, and Taliesin has since moved into the royal palace. It's called the Roof of Heaven. It's this colossal marble castle on top of a cliff that overlooks the capital city of Nenevar. The imagery actually kind of reminds me of Theed, the capital of Naboo from Star Wars, which also has the royal palace sitting on a cliff, and for that I have to stand. The capital city is also cool. There's constant streams of airship traffic, colorful houses, tall glass towers. It's giving Coruscant, but like fantasy tropical edition. Again, I really love the details in this book. Every single location is so richly described and makes you want to go there because the writing allows you to picture it easily in your mind. Like, I want to live in the Roof of Heaven. I would like to exist in a tropical palace made of marble and stained glass. I would like that, please. So in the last few months, Taliesin has basically been given a crash course in how to be a princess. She's had political and cultural lessons. She's been formally presented to the nobility and to the public. She even has a lady in waiting. Her name is Jie, and I love her so much. She is from a noble house and will someday inherit a title, but for now she has the title of Sweetie Pie. Urduha has forbidden Taliesin from visiting the island where the Sardovians are hiding because she'll draw too much attention, apparently. She's also forbidden from practicing her ethermancy. She's not allowed to go to the Light Sever and make herself stronger. Urduha is clearly mistrustful of ethermancers. I think she sees magic as a threat to her authority, so she doesn't let Taliesin practice it because she'd one up her grandmother there. Her grandmother also never calls her Taliesin. She only ever calls her by her birth name of Aluncina. It's like those years she spent in Sardovia don't exist to her grandmother. Taliesin doesn't love that she's being controlled by the queen like this, but she's been kept so busy with princess lessons that she hasn't had time to stage mutiny yet. But soon, trust. Taliesin's relationship with Ilagby, though, is really cute. Like, you can really tell that he's just trying to make up for lost time. He comforts her whenever Urduha is hard on her. He shows her old videos of her mom when she was alive and tells her the story of how they met every time Taliesin asks. Yeah, videos are a thing here in Nenevar. They're kind of like those old-timey film strips, and they're powered by magic, just like everything else. I don't remember the mechanics of how it works, but the book does explain it pretty well, which I thought was really nice. Apparently on the continent, there are only pictures available. Video technology hasn't been invented there yet. The thing about Nenevar is that they're so isolated and stayed out of the war, and because of that, they've been able to make all these technological advancements while the people on the continent spent that time killing each other. Anyway, because Ilagby is a fantasy Filipino prince, I'm imagining him being played by Paolo Montalban because he's Filipino and he also played a legendary prince. It just feels correct to me, like, that's my Prince Ilagby right there. I liked the story of how he met Taliesin's mom. She was a Lightweaver from somewhere called the Dawn Isles. And he met her because he crash landed his airship on her island, and then they fell in love and got married. The court didn't like her because she was an outsider, but Urduha really didn't like her because she actually refused to be named as her heir. And then she died shortly after giving birth to Taliesin from a mysterious illness. That smells suspicious to me, but okay. So life is this new sort of normal, but one fine day... Oh, you thought I was done with that. No, the Kessethes are coming. A number of their ships were spotted, amassing on the borders. Everyone's freaking out. Except Urduha, it must be noted. Taliesin actually sneaks out of the palace and flies to the borders to see the Kessethes for herself. She's like watching with like a spyglass from a middle distance and sees Alaric's storm ship, and her blood literally starts boiling. She's furious that this man, who is now emperor by the way, would be turning up now and trying to ruin her life again. A bunch of Nenevarine ships have arrived, and they're equipped with those same cannons, presumably so that they can fire purple death magic at their enemies. And then a huge dragon wanders by. It wants to see what all the fuss is about. Dragons never hurt the Nenevarine, but if you're literally anyone else, seeing a dragon will be bad news for you. But the Kessethes ships shoot a bolt of that same purple magic at the dragon. They hit its wing, the poor thing. It cries out in pain and falls into the ocean. I'm sad. Alaric like calls his general and is like, did you really have to shoot the dragon? He's like so annoyed, but he doesn't go off because he's new at this whole emperor thing and doesn't want to be seen as temperamental. This is an interesting departure from Kylo Ren, by the way. Alaric is surprisingly level-headed, and Kylo Ren was very much not. That somehow makes him seem more dangerous than Kylo Ren ever was. Like he's just not easily deterred or rattled. Wouldn't it be so funny if Taliesin was the one thing that rattled him? The Night Empire sends a message to the shocked Nenevarine. They're like, yeah, sorry we had to hurt your dragon, but we have your death magic now, and we will use it on you if you guys don't surrender. So surrender. Bye. Yeah, they're here. They want Urduha to bend the knee to the Night Emperor. It is Taliesin's worst fear coming true. The reason that they have the purple death magic now is because of that airship that Alaric stole, which had those Voidfell cannons. They've somehow managed to amplify the purple magic enough to arm a number of their ships, and since death magic is the only one that can penetrate a dragon's hide, Nenevar no longer has an advantage against the Night Empire. They are royally screwed. But an envoy is sent to Alaric's airship. Alaric thinks they're here to discuss the terms of their surrender, but no, the envoy is Niamha Langsoon. I really hope I'm saying that right. She's a Daya, which is what the Nenevarine call their noble ladies. I think the lords are called Rajans. And Niamha is a stunningly beautiful young woman. Alaric's so funny here. He's like, she kind of looks like she's around Taliesin's age. And why am I thinking of her at this time? This clown, I swear. Niamha, an icon. She struts onto a storm ship like she owns the place and goes, yeah, no, we aren't surrendering. If Urduha bows to you, our islands will revolt. We'll never let an outsider rule us, and if you try to invade, we will self-destruct our islands. You won't have anything to rule over once we're done. You'll be king of the ashes. Fortunately, though, we don't have to go that route. No blood has to be shed. Alaric's like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, we're offering you our princess's hand in marriage. We retain our autonomy, and you get a pretty wife and access to all of our resources and our riches. A win-win for everyone. Alaric's like dumbstruck. He has like the biggest headache in the world. Like, what is even happening right now?
What the fuck is going on in here on this day?
He calls bull on the fact that they even have a princess because he's heard that Alancina disappeared years ago and Urduha doesn't have any heirs. But Niamha informs him otherwise with like the cheekiest grin imaginable. Alancina is back home and she's of marriageable age. So make your choice. If you refuse, see you on the battlefield and be ready to rule over nothing. And then she leaves. Alaric contacts his father who is on the continent for guidance. But not by radio, no. Through this world version of a Force Skype call. Apparently only really advanced Shadowforged can do this. They can communicate across great distances using this in-between dimension of the Shadowgate. I thought that was another fun little nod to The Last Jedi, the only sequel trilogy movie ever. So father and son discuss the proposal. Alaric doesn't want to marry someone he doesn't know. He actually doesn't want to marry anyone, period, because he saw how his parents' marriage ended, with his father becoming a genocidal maniac and his mom fleeing the continent. Gaheris is like, shut up, you're going to marry this girl. We need Nenevar's resources. Don't worry though, I hear Nenevarine women are some of the most beautiful in the world. It won't be all that bad. So yeah, Alaric has no choice. Sorry, bro. Meanwhile, Taliesin is furious and rightly so, about being turned into a bargaining chip, a sacrificial lamb to a monster. But Urduha planned for this too. She suspected that the Night Empire would eventually come after Nenevar because they're rich and they have dragons. So she acted accordingly. This woman right here, you'll never catch her slipping. And again, Taliesin has no other choice, but at least this way Nenevar retains its autonomy and they'll be able to control how the Night Empire moves in their territory. So hopefully her Sardovian friends will still remain safe. Because honestly, Nenevar can't fight them if it comes to war. They're outmatched. This is the only way that they can all survive. She has to marry her arch nemesis. So this isn't just the Princess Diaries. This is its final form. The Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement. Whenever I see marriage of convenience or arranged marriage tropes in books, I'm usually like a little bit skeptical because the stakes never seem high enough to warrant something as drastic as marriage between two unwilling characters. But in this case, it's literally a matter of life and death. Like it'll lead to war if they don't head to the altar. So this gets a pass from me. Also, it'll be so juicy to watch the forced proximity come into play between two sworn foes. I can't wait. Taliesin is going through it. She feels betrayed by her family, but she also understands the precarious situation they're all in, so she sucks it up. Elagaby, bless his heart, he tried to sway Urduha, but at the end of the day, she's the queen, and her word is law, so yeah. Alaric and his officers arrive at the roof of heaven. He's begrudgingly accepted the marriage offer. More like he was forced to accept by his evil father, but whatever. Semantics. He briefly thinks about Taliesin again. Like the fact that she might be dead bothers him more than he's willing to admit. But only because he'll never cross paths with her on a battlefield again. No other reason. Okay, sure, Jan. He also wonders what she would think about his impending marriage. Care to explain why you're suddenly thinking about Taliesin's opinion on your marriage? Care to share with the class? Yeah, no one's told him that Taliesin is his future bride. Everyone conveniently left that part out. All he knows is that he's marrying Aluncina Ivralis, Princess of Nenevar. He is going to get the surprise of his life. He arrives at the palace. There are those Saruman bird cages all over the place, you know, in case the Kesethys try to kill everyone in the throne room. The whole court has gathered to welcome the Night Emperor. All the lords and ladies of the land are dressed in all their finery. I just want to take a minute to reiterate how absolutely loaded, filthy rich the Nenevarine are, because Alaric takes one look at the palace and realizes that he would need to empty the entire Kesethys treasury just to maintain this one single building. There are 3 incredibly bejeweled thrones. The biggest, the most bejeweled, is for the queen, another one for her son, and the other for her mysterious heir who he has to marry. The queen welcomes her future grandson-in-law and his officers to her court, and like internally Alaric is still incredibly unwilling to go through with this marriage, but he also just doesn't want to go through another war. He's tired of fighting, and he wants to know what peace feels like. Unfortunately, he will never be at peace again, because Urduha is like, you may now approach your future bride. Taliesin's sitting on her throne, hidden behind a screen, and then the screen is removed. One thing about Thea Guanzon, her love of describing each and every one of her characters' outfits in excruciating detail. Every single outfit we get in this book slays. It was taken straight off of the Fantasy Fashion Week runway. Taliesin's wearing the most jewelry and makeup she's ever worn in her life. She's a self-aware girly. She knows that she looks good in these pretty dresses, but also she's being crushed under the weight of it all. Alaric sees her and is struck dumb again. His bride being this unbelievably beautiful was just not on his bingo card. Literally, his brain just stops working when he sees her. It's so funny. But then he gets a really good look at her, and his heart just stops at his chest. He's just full-on shocked Pikachu here. Oh my god, it's the girl I've been having illegal thoughts about for the past year. It's that girl I used to tussle with on the battlefield. I was so afraid we'd never get to tussle again. And the thing is, Taliesin can literally see it on his face. The relief that she's actually alive. It's brief, but the expression is there. I love that she has no idea what to make of that. But then Alaric gets mad. He thinks this is some trick by Edith Vela, and that they're going to be ambushed by the Sardovians at any moment. Which of course isn't the case. Taliesin and Urduha basically lie through their teeth and tell him that they have no idea where the Sardovians are. Taliesin's so funny. She's like, if you hadn't made such a ruckus back at the Lightsever, they wouldn't have captured me and realized I was their lost princess. So really, I have you to thank. And then the marriage negotiations start. Basically, Urduha and her closest advisors sit down at a table across Alaric and his officers and hash out the terms of their political relationship. Peak romance. Nothing inspires feelings of love more than arguing over trade deals. Everyone knows that. As these negotiations continue, it just becomes increasingly clear to both Alaric and Taliesin that they're going to have to wed and bed each other. They're both like losing their minds at this prospect. Alaric in particular just cannot seem to reconcile this incredibly done up version of Taliesin from the ragged girl he fought during the war. But then he catches her glaring at him with all of the hatred in her little body, and he's like, yeah, that's her all right. By the way, Urduha's advisors are the most powerful lords and ladies in Nenevar, and they all have interesting backgrounds, like her right hand, the hand of the queen. Her family's house controls the largest precious gem mines in the islands. It's a cool bit of world building, very reminiscent of Game of Thrones with all the different houses and the land and resources that they each control. So they hammer out a political alliance. Nenevar retains its autonomy, and the queen continues to rule, but the princess also becomes the Night Empress. And in return, the Night Empire gains access to Nenevar's resources, like their crops and their Etherheart mines. Remember those crystals that can store magic, like the lightsaber crystals? Prince Ilagby, Father of the Year, he adds in a non-negotiable, which is that his daughter be treated with kindness and respect while married to her enemy, which makes Taliesin make this face. Did I mention I love Ilagby? Well, I'm saying it again. Alaric watches the whole exchange with no small amount of jealousy, because his father never stood up for him like that. His father tortures him for fun. No, we can't have these treasonous thoughts. Only a weakling looks for comfort in others. Alaric gets a little sassy at Ilagby here. He's like, your daughter will be treated well if she behaves herself. Which of course makes Taliesin furious. She's not going to sit back and be a good little wife to a tyrant. She calls him a cruel, pompous ass. Go off, sister. I love when my female MCs have a backbone. They're so much fun to read when they're feisty and feral on the outside, with a soft, vulnerable interior, like a crab. Alaric calls her a temperamental child. Both of them are just fully trading barbs back and forth at this point. Alaric actually threatens to call off the negotiations and meet her on the battlefield because she suggested that she still sympathizes with the Sardovians. Everything's unraveling very quickly. Urduha's just like, okay, let's call it a day. Let's all go to bed. Clearly we're all tired. Never going to reach a deal like this. Once the Kessethes leave, the Daya Niamha points out that Alaric seems like a man who is rattled by very few things. But for some reason, Taliesin rattles him. Taliesin's like spluttering. We just really hate each other, that's all. But Niamha just goes, hate is just another kind of passion, is it not? Taliesin just gets incredibly flustered, and every single woman in the room is just like, girl, you really gotta learn how men work. They really called her a virgin in front of God and everyone. And Urduha's like, yeah, try to tone down the hostility on your end. You're only making him want to slaughter us all even more. The Night Empire only wants this marriage because they also want to avoid a war. The Kessethes have been given their own wing at the palace while the negotiations are going on, but they're cut off from their shadow powers, from all the bird cages everywhere. So Alaric can't exactly force Skype his dad and tell him his bride is the Lightweaver that they've been hunting down. So there's that extra layer of fun. Alaric has only brought like 2 people with him to the palace. His bestie Severame and the general of the army, who is a woman. The general, her name I cannot for the life of me pronounce. Matire? Anyway, she used to serve his grandfather back in the day. She's old school. She's like convinced this is all a trick by Edith Vela. She insists that they go and search Nenevar for the Sardovian troops. And Alaric agrees. Oh no. The beans are in danger of spilling. Yeah, I don't know how they're going to avoid being seen if Keseth searches all the islands. Well, okay, Urduha did say the island was far away from all of the other main islands, so maybe they won't even realize that it's there. Severame is a shrewd shadow daddy, though. He notes that Alaric doesn't seem to be all that disappointed in finding the Lightweaver again. Like, it doesn't seem that mad that she's still alive. What's that about, bro? He clocked him. He did. Okay, I think I should end this part of the vlog here. I'm having the time of my life, by the way, reading this book, because I've been yapping about it for literally an hour now, and I'm only like 40% of the way through. There's just a lot to talk about. There's so much happening in this book, but yeah, lots more to unpack, so I will catch you guys later. Alright, it's the next day. I'm about 60% of the way through this book. We got a lot of juicy content. Let's discuss. So we left off on the last part of the vlog with the first day of negotiations kind of ending up in failure. So Urduha just had to call it a day. And then we got what was essentially this scene from the Princess Diaries 2.
I loathe you.
I loathe you.
I loathe you first.
And I couldn't be happier about it. Why? Because it's one of the best scenes in the movie. Argue with a wall. Outside Talison's rooms is a courtyard with an orchid garden in it. Guess who was given the rooms directly across the garden from hers? Yes, she's just standing there sulking, moodily feeding the fish in the pond. When our boy Alaric turns up, he's just kind of staring at her in disbelief. He's like, it is you, after all. Important context for you girlies out there. She's not dressed like a princess here. She's sweatpants, hair tied, chilling with no makeup on. She once again looks like the girl he fought on the battlefield all those months ago. Talison's also taking time to look at him. I must point this out too. She's noticing all these little features, like how pale he is in the moonlight. We love a pasty pale goth prince. Or the fact that she's noticing how big his hands are in comparison to hers, because he isn't wearing his gauntlets for once. They start out conversing relatively amiably. We find out Alaric is actually a few years older than Talison. She tells him her backstory about how she ended up being a Sardovian soldier. But Talison can't quite contain her contempt for him. So we get this incredible scene of her basically calling him an old man because she kept besting him in battle. And he just backs her up against the pond. The only thing keeping her from falling into the pool is his bare fingers at her spine. It's very heated. It's very Princess Diaries 2 garden scene. I love it so much. Alaric is very much trying to intimidate her with his sheer size because she needs to learn to respect her elders. The sparks are flying so high in this garden, they've actually hit atmosphere. Fortunately for Talison, she doesn't end up going for a swim. Alaric lifts her away from the edge of the pool, and he's back to being cold and distant towards her. He tells her he's only going to view their marriage as a political alliance and nothing more. And although Talison feels the same, she can't help but feel sad, honestly, because she's going to marry someone who loathes her. At this point, even though she's a princess, she can count on one hand the number of people she can call her true friends and family. And one of them, Kada, is still MIA. Now she's going to be a bride that will never be loved. I do feel for her. She's never felt like she belonged anywhere, and she was hoping one day she'd find that belonging in the person she'd marry, but that future is lost to her, and that's a sad thing. But as a reader, getting Alaric's POV on all this is deeply funny. That's all I'll say for now. Talison is beginning to spiral here in this orchid garden from all of these depressing thoughts. So she does what every well-adjusted girly does. She seeks refuge in her inner rage. She snaps at Alaric. She's like, you might be the Night Emperor, but I'm the Princess of Nenevar, and this is my turf. And if you ever manhandle me again, you'll regret it. Capiche? And then she storms away. Someone has to walk away first. It might as well be her. I love my FMCs with some backbone. I'll say it again. Okay, the next few days are just continued negotiations. And let me tell you, my boy Alaric is going through it. See, that night in the orchid garden, it did something to him. Talison hadn't been wearing makeup that night, so he'd been able to see her freckles. And that's the image that's been playing in his head in a constant loop. The whole time his thoughts keep straying to that night because he'd seen the Talison he'd remembered, not the Princess of Nenevar. And something in his chest kind of stuttered a little. Care to share with the class what organ you're referring to? The one that stuttered in your chest at the sight of the girl you used to tussle with on the battlefield? Care to share? Yeah, he also keeps fixating on how he touched her back without his gloves on, and apparently he hasn't touched anyone without his armor on in years. Yeah, Gaheris insisted that mastering the shadows required being cut off from external stimuli, so you know what that means? Our boy's a virgin! Yes! I can't stress enough how entertaining it is to have both of our main characters be enemies and virginal touch-starved idiots. This is literature. Put it in the Library of Congress immediately. Immediately. So the negotiations go on, they signed a mutual defense treaty, trade agreements. Isn't this section that you can really tell that Thea used to work in politics, by the way? Because the things they're discussing and agreeing on feel real and tangible, which is really nice. Throughout these meetings, Alaric is quickly realizing that he loves to make Talison mad. He'll say things to rile her up on purpose, and he's amazed every time how much rage she can store in her little body. It just does something for him to see that spark of defiance in her eyes. Guys, I think we found his kink. It's this. By the way, this is the only dynamic ever. All others can and should go home. So during one meeting, Alaric asked for permission to access the Void Sever. By the way, the Void Sever is in the middle of an extinct volcano. I'm a volcano enthusiast, so I loved that piece of lore. Anyway, Taliesin and a few of the other nobles take issue with this. Taliesin's like, imagine what fresh hell these monsters, who created storm ships by the way, will do with literal death magic. But Urdaha comes clean here. She's actually been keeping something from both Taliesin and Alaric. She tells Alaric that he can't, in fact, access the Void Sever. In fact, nobody can anymore. The reason being is that it's become unpredictable recently, it flares open more and more frequently, and soon it will unleash its destruction upon all the land. The Neneverine call this the Dead Season, which happens once every 1,000 years. On the night all 7 moons disappear in total eclipse. During Dead Season, the void magic spreads all over and kills everything in its path. This is the same phenomenon as that fisherman's warning that Cato was telling Taliesin earlier in the book. Over time, Nenevar has learned to take certain precautions so that they can at least evacuate their people and their livestock, but they haven't learned how to stop it. Until now, when they saw that weird magical barrier that Alaric and Taliesin made when their shadow and light magic combined, on the day that Alaric escaped Nenevar and Taliesin found out that she was the princess. So their magic is the only known thing able to neutralize death magic entirely. And that is one of the reasons Urdaha wants this marriage to go through. She wants Alaric and Taliesin to work together to recreate their magic so that they can stop another dead season from happening, which happens to be 5 months from now. So no pressure or anything. Alaric and co are like, well, why should we even bother with this marriage? You guys are probably going to die anyway, and all of your resources will go up in smoke. What's in it for us? And Urdaha's just like, yeah, about that. See, the radius of destruction keeps getting bigger and bigger every time this happens, and this year, by our calculations, the Voidfell will also wash over the continent. So you guys are equally screwed. Sorry. Yeah, Alaric is doomed either way, whether he marries Taliesin or not. But at least by marrying her, he has a fighting chance of keeping the empire he'd spilled so much blood for. Speaking of Taliesin, Girly is beyond angry. She's just numb. She's been left out of the loop for something so incredibly life-threatening and publicly forced by her grandma to work with her sworn enemy, and she feels betrayed by her family again. What's interesting is that Alaric sees that. He sees the exact moment she just slumps in her chair, all the fight gone out of her, and he feels revulsion. Like seeing her chagrined like this feels wrong somehow. It's also because he sees a little of himself in her, because Gaheris also undermined him constantly growing up. He knows the feeling. So he decides to help her out here. A tiny little olive branch. But only because he hates to see her so defeated. He says he'll work with her to recreate their magic. The next day, they attempt to do exactly that. There's a Daya there from one of the islands. That's the center for like technology and innovation in Nenevar. Her name is Ishan. She's also an enchanter and like an inventor of sorts. Alaric and Taliesin show up. They are starting to soften towards each other marginally. Taliesin notices that Alaric's eyes, which are this cold silver sort of color, seem a little warmer than usual, just a little more gentle. This is so unusual. She wonders what he'd look like if he smiled, and then is mortified at the thought. Clowns. I tell you, they're killing me. So Ishan fires a void magic cannon at them. They try to combine their light and shadow magic to deflect it, but nothing happens. The barrier doesn't form. So death is hurtling towards them literally. Alaric kind of tackles Taliesin out of the way, and that's when she realizes what he smells like. Apparently like the alpine forests of the continent. And a little spicy. There's some sandalwood in there, black pepper, myrrh. Might as well make a candle out of this. Oh wait! Now you can smell like your favorite sad, lonely shadow daddy, only while supplies last. Accompanying Taliesin candles sold separately. Talison's like all flustered by his scent and how he's protectively curled around her. She like doesn't know what to do. So she just elbows him in the ribs and scrambles out from under him. That seems like the best response to the situation. So Ishan is like horrified that she almost killed her princess, but Taliesin assures her that no harm done. She won't have her executed for this transgression. Very magnanimous of her. They're all like wondering what the hell just happened. Why didn't their magic work? But Alaric notes that the previous times they were successful, at least one of the 7 moons was in eclipse. So because Athermency is tied to the natural world, it follows that light and shadow magic would be affected by the positions of the sun and the moons. I liked this bit of lore. It was very Atla. I can tell you right now, this will not be the last time I say this. So they're going to try again in a couple weeks when the next eclipse is supposed to happen. Ishan also suggested that they both try and form shields with their magic next time, as that might produce a more effective barrier. But Taliesin still can't make a shield. She can only make offensive weapons made out of light. So Alaric offers to train her, and she agrees. Reluctantly, but she agrees. So she'll be learning magic from someone who is her enemy, and whom she can't stop being flustered around for some reason. What could go wrong? The next day they meet in the orchid garden so Alaric can teach Taliesin the art of magical shield making. I wanted to talk about this scene because a few significant things happen. One is that they actually talk about their past with each other. It's still like pulling teeth for both of them to be this vulnerable around each other, but they're coming to terms with the fact that they are going to be husband and wife soon. And it would help just a little to know where the other person is coming from. So that's what's happening. Alaric's like, why did you come into your powers so late? I became a shadow daddy as soon as I could crawl. But Taliesin tells him about growing up in Hornbill's head and how destitute her childhood was as an orphan on the streets. So she had more pressing matters to deal with at the time, like staying alive. And Alaric actually apologizes, which floored both me and Taliesin. In fact, Taliesin actually falls over because she's just so surprised. My stuffy, snooty little prince can be sorry sometimes. He apologizes for not considering her circumstances before offering his judgment. Taliesin's like, yeah, but you won't ever apologize for being a ruthless colonizer, will you? My girl is out for blood at all times. Anyway, we get a bit more background on Ethermancy. Alaric explains that communing with Severs can unlock past memories and future visions. So if she goes back to the Light Sever, she might be able to remember how she ended up being left on the orphanage's doorstep. Because again, she has no memory of her early life in Nenevar, really. Or what happened to her airship on the day she was evacuated from the palace. It's all a big mystery. Nobody knows why or how their princess disappeared. So it'd be nice to find out. But Taliesin has been forbidden by Urdaha to visit the Light Sever. So that sucks. Even Alaric's just like, what the hell? She asks him about his childhood, and he's immediately like super weird and cagey. Like he basically tells her to mind her own damn business. Like we can immediately tell that his family and his past is definitely kind of a sore spot for him. We get some flashback scenes to his childhood. We learn that his grandfather, the king of Keseth, was brutally killed by Lightweavers, and that from his point of view, Sunstead attacked Keseth first. Then his dad Gaheris ascended the throne that same day and was never the same again. He literally became a genocidal maniac wearing the bloody crown of his slain father. It's a choice, I'll say that. Ooh, we get some juicy info about his mom. Her name was Sansia, and she was basically the only person who ever showed him love and affection. And when he was 13 years old, she fled in the middle of the night, but not before coming to his room and asking him to join her. Alaric refused, and she left. And that's the last he ever saw or heard from her again. Are you guys getting Zuko's mom vibes? Because I am. The vibes are definitely here in the room with us. And the thing is, Alaric is still hurt by that to this day. Even though he'll never admit it to anyone, the fact that the one person who really loved him left him. Apparently his mom fled the continent entirely, but other rumors claim Gaheris actually had her killed. I don't think that's true though. I get the feeling she's still alive and out there somewhere. But I guess we'll see. So Alaric tries to teach Taliesin to make a shield, but she just can't seem to crack it. All she can make are shapeless blobs of light. I really like that Taliesin isn't immediately perfect at using her powers. Like, yes, she is strong in the Force, but she's raw and untamed, for lack of a better term. She has to work at honing her abilities over a long period of time. And this chime just isn't it for her. That's perfectly okay because that's reality. You're not going to be great at everything immediately, even if you do have natural talent. Alaric, for his part, is surprisingly patient and gentle. Even he's surprised, but I'm not. I can see right through this sad boy. Part of the reason Taliesin has trouble making shields is because she'd had to spend so much of her life defending herself, whether she was an orphan on the streets or on the battlefield, so she only ever focused on making offensive weapons. If she could make a pointy thing, it meant she could live to see another day. Alaric tells her she shouldn't have had to grow up like that. Nobody should. He claims that Sardovia failed its citizens. Unfortunately, he made some points there. And the thing is, Taliesin secretly, deep down, agrees with him. But she'd had to overlook all that during the war because growing up poor is arguably better than living under tyranny. You can't argue with that logic. So the negotiations continue. The wedding will take place in Nenevar, but she will have to go to Keseth after because she'll be crowned Night Empress, which is the exact opposite of what Taliesin actually wants to do, but she has to keep the peace. Otherwise, they're all dead. Fair enough. She's also incredibly angry at her dad and her grandmother for keeping the whole dead season thing from her. She's like giving them the cold shoulder, which makes Alagvi so sad. Poor guy. He just wanted a normal relationship with his long-lost daughter, but his conniving mother had other plans. Alaric's teaching Taliesin in the orchid courtyard again, and he's like thinking about everything she'd told him about her horrible childhood. And he like suddenly has the urge to take his storm ships and raise Hornbill's head to the ground. Again, simply because it treated her badly. And then he's like, and why am I having these thoughts? This girl is bewitching me and I'm concerned for my sanity. Oh, hey, Mr. Darcy. Was wondering when you'd show up. He tells Taliesin that the Night Empire is rebuilding the continent. It'll be greater than it ever was before. Nobody will have to live like you did ever again. But Taliesin's like, but at what cost? Was it worth killing all of those people to do it? Even Alaric wonders this. But his loyalty to his father and Keseth is true. So he justifies their methods by claiming that Sardovia had to be destroyed first because Sunstead was the one who attacked Keseth. The other kingdoms also had to be brought to heel because they just stood by and let it happen. Collective punishment for all. Taliesin's like, what? No, that's not what happened. Sunstead was trying to stop Keseth from building those storm ships. Sunstead was trying to resolve everything peacefully, and Keseth attacked them. So they're both getting angry now, arguing about which side actually started the Hurricane Wars. So what is the truth? Because I'm not sure I trust either of their points of view here. Alaric is just going along with whatever his dad said, and Taliesin is just going off of whatever she's heard from the other. Taliesin's like, well, regardless of who shot first, nothing justifies the literal war crimes done by your people. Committing war crimes is not the same as getting justice. Like, you could have stopped after you defeated Sunstead, but you just kept going and annexed the entire continent. You guys are being cruel because you could, because there were no more Lightweavers to keep all of you shadow daddies in check. Which again, points were made. Where does the line between revenge and justice get drawn? Taliesin like angrily stalks off, and Alaric is just left in the garden, all by his lonesome. Not a single second of actual training occurred that day. Oh, and he's staring at some orchids that are shaped like blue butterflies. Oh hey, Ben Solo, my love. I miss you. Yeah, that little Easter egg made me feel all the emotions. Severim like materializes out of the shadows. He's been listening the whole time. He's like, hey bestie, I heard you're having girl troubles. Alaric turns to him and is like, how do I talk to her? How do I get her to like me even a little? His ears are turning red and everything. He just wants peace, but being near Taliesin is anything but. Severim's so funny. He's like, yeah, that's gonna be tough, cause she wouldn't throw water on you even if you were on fire. Indeed, she would be the one to set me ablaze, Alaric muttered. With a dragon. Again, this book is mislabeled. This is a rom-com. Severim helpfully suggests that Alaric give her a compliment. Maybe even give her a smile. And Alaric just glares at him. Maybe just look less like a dour thundercloud when you're around her. Maybe just do that. Severin gives surprisingly helpful advice though. He tells him that she's just lashing out because she's scared and she wants to avoid a war. Just like him. Just don't rise to the bait. Severim is clearly his underpaid therapist. It's also interesting the way he has more people experience than Alaric does, but it makes sense. Severim is very charming, and he's also kind of a hoe, as opposed to Alaric, who was trained to be a war machine since childhood. Like, women are very much not his area of expertise. He's literally never had time to be a hoe like his bestie. By the grace of his father's training, he has never been seduced, until now. The virgin energy is strong in this one. Later, Taliesin's reflecting on their argument in the garden. She's thinking about how even though Alaric was angry, he never shouted at her or raised his voice. His rage is more quiet and subdued, which was something she wasn't expecting. Because she spent her whole childhood around caretakers who screamed all these abuses at her and got very violent. So Alaric's anger being kind of the opposite makes her feel safe, oddly enough. The next afternoon, Taliesin is meant to go back to the garden for more training with Alaric, but she plays hooky. Why? Because the pudding man is here at the palace. And if there's one thing Taliesin would go to war for, it's dessert. So she leaves Alaric on red and gets in line to buy a cup of this pudding. Yes, this princess waits her turn in line just like everyone else. The people's princess, truly. The pudding merchant is this old man wearing like a straw hat with teeth stained like orange from chewing too many betel nuts in his day. Incredible look, it has to be said. The pudding he's serving is taho, by the way. Iconic Filipino dessert. I've never had it myself, but one day, trust. For now, I'll have to live vicariously through Taliesin and Alaric, who's just showed up to the party, looking incredibly annoyed at being ghosted. Taliesin buys him a pudding cup. She even pays the poor pudding merchant extra simply for having to put up with her grumpy betrothed. All the servants are like staring, seeing if the fearsome Night Emperor will do something as prosaic as eat pudding. Meanwhile, Alaric looks at the pudding like he's being offered like a venomous snake or something, but he eats it. And all he says is, "It's interesting." Taliesin decides right then and there that this man is a lost cause when it comes to joining the pudding fandom, but she does notice that he ate the entire thing. So maybe he's not entirely a lost cause, and also that his bottom lip is stained with the shine of the brown sugar syrup. Interesting thing to fixate on there, Taliesin. Would you like to share with the class why you're fixating on his lips in particular? Anyway, I loved the pudding scene. It was such a cute moment. It's also another point of commonality between them, like the fact that they both have a sweet tooth, because during the war, things like sugar were rationed, so neither of them got to indulge in much dessert before now. It's also a nice sort of peaceful exchange between them, and that energy kind of continues into their training session after. While he's teaching her to meditate, he asks her about her mother, and she tells him the story of how her parents met and how she had died of an illness. He's immediately like, what could have killed a powerful light weaver like her? But Taliesin doesn't know and doesn't like talking about it. All she knows is that it was a mysterious illness, and he apologizes again for two things. One, for bringing up the painful memory of her mother, and two, for losing his temper yesterday. Man, what was in that pudding? We got a 2-in-1 apology from the evil Shadow Daddy. Taliesin also apologizes for storming off, which kind of shocks Alaric. Like, maybe being nicer to her actually worked? Is Severim actually a genius? Severim needs a raise, by the way, in my humble, extremely correct opinion. Taliesin asks him what happened to his mother, and even though he doesn't like talking about it, he strangely wants to now. With her, and that she was from a land called Valisa, which is on the other side of the world, and that's likely where she is now if she isn't dead. And he wonders if his mother ever thinks of him, wherever she is, but he doesn't miss her, no, because she was weak and couldn't handle being Night Empress. Taliesin then admits she also thought the same while growing up as an orphan. She wondered if her mother would ever come to take her away from that miserable place. I really loved the scene. It's just both of them connecting with each other through their grief over their respective mothers, because discussing their pain with each other allowed them to feel less alone. And they feel kind of winded by that. The fact that there is someone out there who understands exactly what they're going through, even though that person happens to be their enemy and their betrothed at the same time. But then things turn from a little sweet to a little spicy. Alaric's like trying to get Taliesin to meditate, but she's just like scrunching up her nose trying to concentrate, which is the arrow that pierces him through the chest. Oh, what is this feeling? I don't think it's loathing. He's just like full on ogling her, all while wondering what his life would have been like if he hadn't met her at all. Again, we're like at that point where the enemies are realizing that their nemesis is the one that makes their life so entertaining. Like Alaric is having this exact epiphany at this moment, and it's so validating. Then later he's like correcting her posture, and she somehow falls back against his chest, and Alaric straight up loses his mind. This man gets one whiff of this girl and cannot form a single coherent thought. Taliesin smells like mangoes. Alaric loves mangoes. He's had them every day since he's been in Nenevar, and he's obsessed. He's never had them before coming to Nenevar. He was a mango virgin. That slick, sweet golden fruit haunts his dreams, and the girl who also occupies his thoughts smells like them. He just can't catch a break. She also smells like jasmine and orange blossoms. Yeah, I think I do need to buy that Taliesin candle, actually, for science. Side note, I just bought the Le Labo Jasmine perfume, the 15ml one. I'm not made of money here. And I just feel crazy when I smell it. I feel like Alaric when he smells Taliesin in the scene. Alaric feels so crazy, in fact, that he wants to bite her. He's actually regretting the fact that he's wearing gauntlets right now because he can't physically feel her against him. It's such a K-drama moment. There's like flower petals wafting in the breeze. They're both like standing there staring at each other, dazed at their proximity. He's wondering, for some insane reason, if her lips will taste like the pudding they just ate. Even more ludicrously, he leans down because he wants to find out. And there's Severine. He's very apologetic to interrupt, but they both must return to the palace because there's an engagement banquet happening in their honor that night, and they both have to be there or be square. Oh man. Well, that's as far as I read. I think we were getting to a rather interesting point there just now, so I'm going to go read some more. Catch y'all later. Hi, I'm back. We're like 80% of the way through this book. A lot has happened in the last few chapters, and I need to talk about it with someone, and all I have are you all, my willing captives. So let's discuss. So we left off with our favorite clowns almost kissing, but they were rudely interrupted by Severine telling them it's time to get ready for their engagement banquet. Or, well, no, it was more like Urduha ordering Severine to go tell them to get ready. Blame the grandma. Talison's just like in a daze while Jie gets her dolled up. She's like processing what the hell just happened. Meanwhile, Jie, remember her, Talison's cinnamon roll of a lady in waiting? Jie is like, hey, now that I think about it, your future husband is actually kind of hot. I mean, he's got that tall, dark, and handsome thing going on. His lips are so pillowy. And that's all about Talison can handle. She's like, I order you to stop talking right this second. Jie is like this sheltered teenage girl who grew up in a castle, and she's largely unaware of the contentious way that Talison and Alaric's relationship began. So she's just out here telling Talison she hopes Alaric will just romance her properly, like steal kisses and write her love letters. Meanwhile, Talison is just listening to all this and going, sis, this man was out here trying to kill us a few months ago, and I was also trying to kill him, but whatever, that's minor details. It's very funny, the juxtaposition of how Jie and Talison view Alaric, although Talison is deeply flustered from the events that just occurred earlier that day, so maybe she's realizing where Jie is coming from now. She'll never admit it though. Urduha and Alagbi stop by because Talison is still giving them the cold shoulder over not telling her about the whole dead season thing. Urduha's like, I know you're mad at us, but I only did it because you not knowing would make Alaric trust you more. And it did. He sympathized with you because he saw that you were left out of the loop, same as him. One thing about the queen, she overthinks everything to a microscopic degree, and that's how she held on to power for this long. And now it looks like she's going to use the same talent to control Talison and Alaric's relationship. Yikes. Once again, this is not Clarice Rinaldi, Queen of Genovia. This is Laurice Kinaldi, her evil twin sister. She loves her family, I think, but she loves power more. Priorities, you know? Alaric's like waiting for Talison outside the banquet hall, and he's equally going through it. He's thinking about how he's a shadow forged and he shouldn't be going around kissing light weavers. They're supposed to hate each other. But then Talison arrives all dressed up and pretty, and not a single neuron is firing in his brain. He's like trying to give her a compliment, like Severine suggested, but his tongue is just nailed to the roof of his mouth. What's with that? Also, he's low-key afraid that she'll like punch him or something if he comments on her outfit. And then he sees her like blushing when he looks at him, and he has the sudden urge to punch himself in the face. What's with that? During the banquet, they're seated next to each other and surrounded by Nenevrine nobles. Both of his officers were conveniently seated further down the table from him, so he's like suffering on two fronts here. First of all, he's all too aware of Talison seated next to him, and second, these nobles are tearing into him like he's the 7-course meal they're having for dinner. By the way, I love the description of every single food in this book. Super detailed. Do not read this book on an empty stomach. You will suffer. Just like Alaric is here. Talison going through it as well. She's realizing that maybe her lady-in-waiting was right regarding her husband's looks, but she can't ogle her husband in peace because these nobles are coming after him in the most polite, backhanded way possible. They're taking him to task about how he infiltrated Nenevar earlier in the book, how he injured their soldiers and stole one of their airships, and the fact that he tried to kill their princess on the battlefield many times. Alaric is actually holding his own. He's like, well, technically because of me, you have a princess now. You're welcome. You wouldn't have found her if you didn't discover us at your light sever, and I am going to hold to the terms of our peace treaty now. Will you? The nobles are like turning to Talison, presumably to see who she'll choose to defend in this conversation, them or him. But my girl is like panicking from all the attention. This is good soup, isn't it? Sublime! We got the good soup meme! This is my favorite reference in the whole book. I was cracking up reading it. It was not my girl Talison's finest moment. Alaric fully teasing her at this point. He's asking her for her expert opinion on every single other dish on the table. This whole dinner scene is so full of unexpectedly sweet moments. Like Alaric sees Talison openly laughing for the first time, and it makes him feel a certain type of way. Like everyone else in this room would secretly order his assassination, but Taliesin would actually just kill him herself. She's not hiding her hatred for him the way the other nobles are, and that's what makes her so genuine. And he's feeling something dangerously close to affection because of it. My guy, I think you crossed the danger zone a while ago. Just my 2 cents. Anyway, that part made me feel warm and fuzzy inside for some reason. Okay, so after that, another noble crashes the party. I was really excited for this part because he was one of my favorite characters in the original fanfic version of this, and he's here now, and he's ready to rumble. His name is Suraquel? I really hope I'm saying that right. Suraquel is a young lord around Taliesin's age. He's the heir to one of the most powerful families in Nenevar. They control the largest private army in the country, and he's also the nephew of the queen's right hand. And because of this, he's kind of difficult for Urduha to control, because she can't really afford to step on her right hand's toes, because she's her biggest ally. Suraquel is kind of a nomad. He spends most of his time away from Nenevar, traveling the world, but he's come back to crash this party because he hates Keseth. They're a despotic regime, and their emperor cannot be allowed to marry our princess. Suraquel isn't an isolationist like the queen is. He actually wanted Nenevar to aid Sardovia during the Hurricane Wars. So basically, he's very much opposed to this marriage and challenges Alaric to a duel, trial by combat. Urduha can't really say anything against him because, again, he's from one of the most powerful families in Nenevar, and also because he's popular among the younger nobles for his more liberal ideals. So she really has no choice but to let him fight the Night Emperor. It's nice seeing her backed into a corner like this. It's pleasing to me to see her humbled, just a little. Alaric calmly accepts the terms, which is so funny because Taliesin can clearly see how angry he actually is. He just wanted to enjoy his engagement dinner with his pretty wife-to-be. He didn't ask to be challenged to a duel. The terms are, if Suraquel wins, Alaric has to give up all claim to Taliesin and leave Nenevar forever. If Alaric wins, Suraquel simply has to shut his mouth. Yeah, even his general was like, why are you being so lenient with this man? But Alaric is trying to show everyone assembled that he can be level-headed, as opposed to Suraquel's shoot first, ask questions later approach. So they fight with traditional swords because Alaric is still cut off from his shadow powers because those darn bird cages are everywhere. Taliesin is starting to realize that she doesn't want Alaric to get hurt, actually. She tried to stop Alaric from accepting the challenge, but he literally just lifts her to the side like, I'll handle this, little princess. What if I started screaming? What then? Alaric and Suraquel both managed to injure each other, but in all the fighting, one of the bird cages is smashed open, the bird flies away, and Alaric's shadow powers come back. And that's when Taliesin knew it would be so over for Suraquel. Alaric will kill him, and it'll cause a whole diplomatic headache. So she does the rational thing to do, which is to put herself squarely in the path of the shadow spear that Alaric hurled towards Suraquel. Note that she still can't summon a shield at this point, so there's that little wrinkle. All she can do is send another shapeless blob of light, which does nothing to stop the shadow spear, unfortunately. At this point, you can kind of just feel Alaric's heart stop. He's just watching with dawning horror at the fact that Taliesin is about to be impaled by his own spear. More on that in a second. He's able to shift the spear's course so that she doesn't, in fact, get impaled, but it does kind of graze her arm enough for it to start bleeding. Everyone in the room is just watching in stunned silence. Alaric is beside himself. He's just vibrating with barely suppressed rage. The scene just really highlights why I love the dual POV in this book, because Taliesin is so funny here. She thinks he's about to kill her. She's like, I got in his way of killing Suraquel, so he's going to kill me first. And she's actually kind of worried for her life, like to the point where she's wondering if she can even fight him when he's angry, because rage is usually her department of expertise. So having him be the angry one is really unsettling to her. But because we also have Alaric's POV, we know that she has absolutely misread the reason for his anger, because he stalks over to her, inspects her injury, and demands that she get medical attention immediately. She's like, no, I'm fine, really. But he just snaps at her. Like, her going to the healer is absolutely not up for debate here. This is a who did this to you moment, except I did this to you, and I don't know how to process that. Alaric tells Urduha and the other nobles that he's done with their BS. He came here to accept a marriage proposal and sign a peace treaty, but he's been treated with hostility and challenged to a literal duel. All of that ends now. He demands that they remove the bird cages so that he can access his powers again. He also calls out Urduha on the fact that she prevented her granddaughter from practicing ethermancy, and that's the reason she almost died today, because she couldn't even make a shield. He tells her that he'll take Taliesin to the Lightsaber himself, because Urduha no longer has the right to dictate where he can go within Nenevar. Like, she lost that privilege when she allowed one of her subjects to challenge him to a duel, which, fair. So he lists out all of these demands for the queen and the nobles to hear, and that if they don't agree, to consider their sides officially at war. Urduha just nods in assent, like she has well and truly been put in her place. And then he limps out of the hall with his officers because Suriquel did manage to nick him. Yeah, no one really won this duel. Everyone involved just ended up getting injured. The hall erupts into chaos after the Kessithis leave. The nobles are all upset over what just happened. They're railing to Urduha that their princess shouldn't be allowed to marry a shadow wraith. Suriquel comes up to Taliesin and both apologizes and introduces himself to her at the same time. And he declares that he owes her a life debt because she just saved his skin from being impaled. But the nobles are really starting to complain here because a lot of them agree with Suriquel. However, they don't realize the danger they're in with the whole dead season thing. And also the fact that they can't win in an actual war with Kessith now. Maybe they could have before Kessith stole their death magic, but that's no longer a possibility. Nenevar needs this alliance with Kessith to save them all. So Taliesin has to go through with it. Taliesin decides to save her grandmother from the ire of her nobles. She tells them that this marriage was her choice and that she sides with the queen's decision to go ahead with it. And then she leaves immediately after because she's kind of worried about a certain shadow daddy. She wasn't the only one bleeding. She goes to Alaric's room. He yanks her inside and inspects her injury again. She saw a doctor, by the way. She's all bandaged up and everything. But still, he needs to make sure. Meanwhile, Alaric's bleeding from a gash on his thigh. Taliesin's I can try and heal that for you. But this shadow daddy is furious with her. He calls her a beautiful little idiot. And how could she be so stupid to put herself in harm's way like that? He's saying all this as he's backing her up against the wall, but she literally doesn't hear a word that he's saying. She's so flustered by his nearness. She can smell his spicy forest scent up close. She's like, what? What was your question? Burley's whole train of thought has gone off the rails. Alaric can only stare at her in disbelief. He's reeling from the fact that he almost just killed her, but he's also so confused at her reaction. Taliesin gathers enough brain cells to try and fumble an apology out to him on behalf of her country. Sorry you ended up being challenged to a duel and everything. Alaric just growls at her to leave. He needs time to process everything that happened today, and he also doesn't need to hear her parroting her grandmother's words back at him. But the thing is, she doesn't want to leave. Despite everything, she genuinely wants to make sure he's okay. Maybe even get him to kind of smile the way he did during dinner when he was making fun of her good soup gaffe, but he orders her to leave again. So she does. She briefly wonders if he was so angry because he was worried about her, but then immediately is like, no, that can't be. He hates me. Well, wait, he called me beautiful. No, I'm sure he still loathes me. I loved this scene. 10 out of 10, no notes. They're both so clearly past the hating stage, but neither are ready to admit it in so many words. They are suffering with a capital S, and it's so entertaining to watch. Alaric cannot sleep that night. This man is sick to his stomach. He keeps focusing on the fact that he'd hurt his bride. He actually drew blood, which is crazy considering how they've hurt each other similarly on the battlefield all those times before. But the tables have obviously tabled now. Something's changed. He's also hung up on the way Taliesin looked at him earlier, all breathless and confused, asking him to repeat his question. Yeah, what was that about? Alaric's stewing because he thinks Urduha sent Taliesin to apologize on her behalf, but that's actually not true. She came of her own accord. Oh, and now since all the bird cages have been taken down, he can access his shadow powers again. And guess whose calls are coming through? Yeah, that slimy ghoul Geharis calls him through that shadowy force bond in between sort of place I was telling you about earlier. So Alaric answers. His dad is sitting on a giant throne and looking pissed. Likely place for him to be, if we're being real here. He spends most of his time in this book sitting on a dark chair, looking mad at his son. Geharis is mad because Alaric didn't inform him that his bride is actually the light weaver that they've been trying to hunt down. He throws all these abuses at his son because he can tell that he feels a strange sort of compassion for the Lightweaver, and that is no bueno. Lightweavers are our enemies, you imbecile. You're letting your affection for the girl cloud your judgment. Gaheris calls him his mother's son for feeling all those pesky feelings, and that actually really hurts. Because his mom ran away. She was a weakling. We can't be like her. Oddly enough, Gaheris is still for this marriage, but only to prevent Dead Season from happening. After that, he doesn't want Alaric anywhere near the Lightweaver. Gaheris is convinced Taliesin knows where the Sardovian remnant is, which is true, and he also takes his son to task for not following up on that. Alaric is getting the verbal beating of his life during this scene, but don't worry, Gaheris promises to punish him severely upon his return to Keseth. Trust! Gaheris is like Fire Lord Ozai and Snoke combined, just an absolutely evil menace to society. Honestly, every time he appears, I want to throw something out the window, preferably him. I want him dead in a ditch. Thanks. Unfortunately, I get the feeling that he won't be dead for quite some time, because this is only the first book in the trilogy. The next morning is the last day of negotiations, and Alaric is in the worst mood Taliesin has ever seen him in. I call it the talking to your genocidal maniac of a father effect. The Nenevarine are like so careful around Alaric today because they know that one wrong move will cause him to rain his storm ships down on all of their heads. Taliesin and Alaric sign their marriage contract. Taliesin's like trying to engage him with like small talk, but he's just doing his utmost to ignore her, which is odd because she distinctly remembers that he called her beautiful the night before. I mean, he also called her an idiot in the same breath, but whatever, that's less important. So it's official, their engagement is signed and sealed. As a fun little betrothal present, Alaric informs them all that his fleet will be doing a sweep of the Nenevar Islands over the next few days, in case they're still in cahoots with the Sardovians. If by the end of their search they don't find any trace of them, Alaric will personally take Taliesin to the Lightsever so that she can commune with it and hopefully make a shield. Urduha allows this. Taliesin, meanwhile, is trying not to let her internal panic show. But later that night, Urduha calls Taliesin to her rooms. Niamha and Ishan are there as well, the two Dayas, because they have some tricks up their bejeweled sleeves to prevent her Sardovian friends from being discovered after all. So apparently the Storm God's Eye, where the Sardovians are currently hiding, is too far away from the main islands to be visible from the air. The other thing is that the map that Urduha gave Alaric is old and was from before the time that that island was part of Nenevar. There's also the fact that the Storm Dimension Sever is there, and it might activate while they're searching, which would also deter them from looking there. So chances are that the Kesethese won't even realize that the island exists. But just in case, they made a contraption that makes people disappear. Again, we get this cool blend of fantasy and sci-fi here. Remember those disappearing Tarsiers from earlier? Basically, this tech combines the disappearing power of those little primates and the nullification power of Saruman blood, those birds in the cages that takes people's magic away, and creates this kind of force field that will completely hide the Sardovian fleet from view. It's like they aren't even there. And technically they aren't. So in this world's lore, magical animals can move between the different dimensions of Etherspace. This is why those Tarsiers disappear, and why dragons are so elusive despite their colossal size, because they're literally traveling between different universes. If your pet dragon decides to peace out for the day, it's because he decided to go to Mumbattan for some chai tea. Super cool lore. I hope we get more into this because I'm curious to know what those other dimensions are like. Anyway, Taliesin is stunned at this sorcery, and honestly so was I. Was not expecting something quite so out there as this, but Miss Thea delivered. This is how far advanced a nation can get when it's not fighting in war. And because Nenevar is so advanced, maybe Sardovia will prevail after all. So Alaric requests, more like demands, that Taliesin join him on his personal storm ship the next day while they do their sweep of the islands. She boards that ship wearing a revenge dress of sorts. It's like this skin-tight thing with this plunging neckline. Like one wrong move and Taliesin will be giving the Kesethese an eyeful that they surely don't want. I don't know about that. I think one Shadow Daddy in particular would argue the opposite. I don't think she realized that it was a revenge dress, by the way. Ga is the one who picked it out for her. Girlie said, "I heard you and your mans were in a crisis. I'm on my way." Well, I think it worked. She like waddles on board, wrapped in this dress with Ilagbi. Alaric takes one look at her and like chokes on his own tongue. Alaric is so frosty to both of them, but he invites them to the captain's lounge and offers them a sweet wine to drink. Not because he knows Taliesin has a sweet tooth or anything. That has nothing to do with it. The drinks are brought in by a mousy looking aide. Is that a reference to what I think it is? My heart tells me yes. Prince Ilagbi is like, "So, we need to talk. about your wedding night. Actually, you two need to talk about your wedding night in your very much separate seats. I'll leave you to it. Bye. At this point, both Alaric and Taliesin just spit out their wine. They're like choking and gagging because they weren't expecting this conversation to go in this direction, you know? Yeah, not your smoothest moment, my Prince Paolo Montalban, but it is your funniest. Basically, for their marriage to be seen as valid in the eyes of the court, Alaric has to spend the night in Taliesin's chambers, but pretty much nobody is expecting them to actually sleep together. At least Elagby isn't. He's like, naturally, I'm not going to force my precious only daughter to sleep with a shadow daddy because this is a political marriage only. But we do have to make it look like you did. Yeah, Alaric and Taliesin are both like contemplating pitching themselves overboard during this entire conversation. I mean, I would too if my dad decided to discuss my wedding night. Alaric fully having an internal meltdown over the dress his future wife is wearing. This is where we get the actual confirmation that Alaric is a virgin. Like, we find out he's never been with anyone before, never wanted to be, until now. He doesn't tell Taliesin this is just his internal monologue. Taliesin's like, fine, we can share my room for the night. You're going back to the continent the next day anyway, so it won't be a problem. But it actually is kind of a problem for Alaric, because being around this girl makes his brain turn to mush. And unfortunately, he's still insecure from his conversation last night with his father, so he just lashes out at her. He's honestly kind of mean. He's like, yeah, I'm not exactly gung-ho about sleeping with you anyway. To which Taliesin goes, I wouldn't sleep with you if you were the last man alive. Oh, hey there, Lizzie Bennet. So nice to see you. Yeah, they both kind of devolve into another fight from there. Honestly, some major barbs are sent back and forth. Like, they both tell each other they don't actually want to be married. Alaric calls her shrewish and that he'd had better options elsewhere. And that really hurts Taliesin. So much that it shows on her face, and Alaric's just winded. Like, why does it seem like she suddenly cares about his opinion? She's like, but I thought you said I was beautiful. She clocked him. She did. Unfortunately, Alaric knows that he's been caught, so he backtracks and says, you merely clean up well. You're only pretty when you're all dolled up like this. Which, by the way, is the world's biggest lie. He is a liar. This man spends all his free time thinking about this girl's freckles under her makeup. Then Taliesin drops the biggest bomb of all. That she sees him for what he really is, a tyrant. An evil, bad man whose subjects will one day rebel against him, and when that day comes, she won't hesitate to join them. So this chapter is kind of the breaking point. Like, everything they're feeling about each other is just starting to boil over. Like, they're both insisting that this marriage will be a loveless one. Alaric especially doesn't see marriage as something that can ever be happy based on what happened to his parents. But that's not the case for Taliesin, because she's seen how much Elagby loved her mother and how much he misses her to this day. So there's kind of a rift there. Alaric tells her he neither wants her love nor her friendship, but he will require her cooperation. And if she doesn't, Nenevar will suffer for it. She tells him that she hates him. She hates him with everything she has. Girl, I gotta say, if I hate someone, I'm not gonna go to their room after they've been injured and offer to heal them like you did last night. I don't know, maybe I'm just built different, but I do know a thing or two about being a true hater. I'm from New Jersey. Alaric accuses her of hiding the Sardovian fleets, which she is, but she denies it. So this whole conversation leaves them both feeling hurt and furious. And that's how you know they actually have feelings for each other, because they wouldn't be this pressed otherwise. They just wouldn't care what the other thinks, but they do. And unfortunately at this point, neither of them can separate the other from the war. Like, there is that growing attraction between them, but their differing political and moral beliefs are the one thing that's preventing them from acting on their feelings. Alaric goes back to the main deck to continue overseeing the sweep. Severin comes along to report that, hey, I think Taliesin was telling the truth from earlier. I don't think they're hiding the Sardovians because we can't find any evidence of them anywhere. Which of course makes Alaric feel super bad, because he'd accused her of treason and told her all these horrible things, and the whole time she was being honest with him. Severin, relationship expert extraordinaire, takes one look at Alaric and goes, you've been fighting with her again, haven't you? Man, I told you that's not how you go about making heirs. You're supposed to tell her she looks pretty and give her smiles. By the way, I totally saw y'all the other day, almost kissing in the gardens. So proud of you, bestie. Maybe you do know a thing or two about making heirs. Alaric just asks him to choose whether he wants to die by his magic or simply be thrown off his airship. This is the bromance of the century. Classic golden retriever and black cat energy. Give us more Severin and Alaric content. It's what the people want. So the question still remains for the Kessethes. Where are the Sardovians? because they aren't in Nenevar, but trust that whoever is hiding them will be crushed into oblivion. Later that night, Taliesin makes up her mind to go visit her Sardovian friends, who mercifully weren't found thanks to the power of the disappearing Tarsiers. At this point, Edith Bella hasn't been told about her impending marriage, nor about the fact that they all might die in the dead season coming up. Yeah, that's quite a bit to catch up on. Hey, Emirante, did I mention my husband's going to be the Night Emperor? The one that tried to kill us all? So she sneaks out in the middle of the night, but as soon as she opens the door, her husband-to-be is right there, looming in the doorway. He just wanted some fresh air in the middle of the night, outside her door. The air is just fresher there, I swear. He's like, and where do you think you're going, young lady? I specifically ordered you to stay put. She's like bristling, like, what the hell is this guy's deal? First telling her he doesn't want anything to do with her, and now he's all up in her business like this. She like makes up some excuse about feeling hungry, so she's off to the night markets down in the capital for a midnight snack. Alaric's like, no, that wasn't so hard, was it? So, when do we leave? Talison's like, excuse me? We? Yes, we, because Alaric wants to make sure Taliesin isn't lying, and also he's a little hungry too. So they both sneak out of the palace, scaling down the cliffs with like grappling hooks. Alaric is a little concerned that Taliesin knows how to give the guards the slip so easily, but he's actually having fun. Like sneaking around and stealing off into the night with a pretty girl. It's also adventurous and freeing, which is something he's never had before because he was too busy fighting wars. Cute first date idea for your situationship with your mortal enemy. Sneak away into a night market and try every food stall until sunrise. Just try not to wind up dead in a ditch in the process. Which is something Alaric is also mildly worried about. As Taliesin steers them down dark alleys, he keeps asking her if this is the part where she's going to stab him and leave him for dead. I swear to God, this boy is so dramatic. I love the description of the night markets, by the way. Super detailed. A lot of the very Southeast Asian specific foods are described by their shape and color rather than by name, because this part is from Alaric's POV and a lot of these foods are foreign to him. So it's just a kind of fun Easter egg hunt to try and guess their real world equivalents. They grab some food to eat. Their hoods are still covering their faces, by the way, because there are banners plastered all over the city with Taliesin's face on them. Filipino tarp culture alive and well in the Hurricane War saga. It's so funny the difference between Alaric and Taliesin's table manners. Taliesin scarfs down every single meal like it's her last. Meanwhile, Alaric really likes to take his time to savor his food. I feel like this will bode well for their relationship in the future. For Taliesin specifically. Okay, I'll see myself out. There's some drunken men nearby, making all these increasingly outlandish plans to storm the palace and rescue their princess from the Night Emperor's clutches. They're speaking in Nenevarine, which Alaric can't understand, but Taliesin hears everything, and it's just a funny scene. Like the two subjects of their conversation are sitting right next to them. Peak comedy. But then the men are like, yeah, our princess is marrying an outsider, but she's also an outsider, so maybe it's for the best. Which suddenly makes her not very hungry anymore. And honestly a little sad. This quote really kind of sums it up. Back in Sardovia, she had grown up waiting for her family to come back. Now that she had found her family, it consisted of a grandmother who thought nothing of using her as a bargaining chip, and a father who would never side with her over his queen in a homeland where she was an outsider. Like, you get the sense of how truly alone she feels, but maybe there is someone out there who gets it. This chapter was a much needed bonding session between Alaric and Taliesin. Like, he sees her cry for the first time, I think, and this kind of gentleness he didn't know he had just sort of comes out. She asks him a question that I've been waiting to hear for a while, and that is, why didn't he kill her during the wars when he had the chance? He could have easily done so at so many points, but he didn't. And he gets a little defensive at first. I wonder why. But eventually he admits that he was curious because he'd never met a Lightweaver before. And at the last battle, he saved her from that falling column because he felt like it would have been wrong to let her die like that. Which Taliesin strangely understands, as only a fellow soldier would, because death is only worth it if it happens in glorious battle. Alaric has a compassionate nature, which, based on the flashback, seems to be coming from his mom, but his father has since tried to stamp it out of him. His efforts have gone in vain. There's still some Ben Solo left in this Kylo Ren. The question is, which side of himself will he ultimately choose? The capital city is celebrating their princess's engagement with fireworks tonight. As they watch the fireworks, Alaric gently tells her that someday the entire continent will look like this. No one will have to suffer like she did. To which she asks, again, was it worth the cost? And Alaric still has no real answer to that. But he says that he can have allegiance to his nation and dislike what she went through. Both can be true. But that's still not enough for Taliesin. She needs him to understand that vengeance isn't the same as justice. and his nation fought the war believing the two were the one and the same. So they're at an impasse again, and they return to the palace in silence. This chapter was great because they were both so open and vulnerable with each other, but at the end of the day, again, their war-torn past is what continues to haunt them. And underneath it all is that magnetic sort of attraction that they feel for each other, which is like simmering on the back burner, slowly but surely getting warmer each time. It's just a really compelling dynamic, especially in these quieter, more character-driven moments. The next day, Taliesin resolves to actually make the trip to the Storm God's Eye to see her Sardovian friends. She calls in her life debt to Surokwell to do it, so he sneaks her on board his fancy airship yacht. Also, side note, Surokwell and the Daya Niamha are in some sort of relationship. They were childhood friends who are now sweethearts, maybe? At the very least, Surokwell's ship is named the Even Star, which is what Niamha's name happens to translate to. I loved their relationship in the OG fanfic, so I really hope we get to see more of them in future books. Since Surokwell was sympathetic to Sardovia's cause, Taliesin tells him that Nenevar is actually hiding the Sardovians, so he's her trusted ally now. So Taliesin and Surokwell arrive on the island, and the Sardovians come out of hiding. This island is actually under Niamha's family's domain, so her house has been providing them with the food and the supplies to fix their ships. Taliesin tells Edith Vela everything. The fact that she's marrying the Night Emperor of all people, and that they have to work together to stop the world from ending in a few months. Edith Vela says a couple of interesting things here. For one thing, she tells Taliesin it's time to stop letting her grandmother walk all over her. Hear, hear! Especially because she's marrying Alaric, which will make her the Night Empress. And once she's Night Empress, technically she'll outrank Urduha. This will also allow her to spy on Keseth, because to truly defeat them, they have to get to Gaheris. I love that everyone knows that Gaheris is still the main menace, even though Alaric is the Emperor now. But that does raise the question of what to do with Alaric once they kill Gaheris, because by then he'll be her husband, and he'll still be the Emperor. So yeah, kind of a sticky situation. Sure hope they don't catch feelings for each other in the process, because that would make it quite a big mess. I love that Taliesin's just like, we'll figure out what to do with Alaric later. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Now why is that? Care to share with the class why you don't want to think about potentially killing your husband? So Taliesin returns to the palace armed with a resolve that she very much does not feel. And the next day Alaric takes Taliesin to the Light Sever, as he'd promised. And they can't land an airship there, so instead they're going on a pleasant little hike that's honestly anything but. Especially for Alaric, that man does not know how to dress for tropical humidity. He's wearing all black long-sleeve clothing, because black is all the rage among the Shadow Daddies of Keseth. Because Keseth is on the northern end of the continent, and it's significantly colder there, so it's possible he just has no summer clothing whatsoever. So he's just sweating at buckets, trying not to look at Taliesin because she's wearing like a sleeveless shirt and skin-tight pants, which causes his mind to go down dangerous roads. In fact, if he stares at her for too long, his own pants will start to feel a little tight, which is concerning because this has literally never been his reaction to anyone before. What is going on? At one point, they are chased by an angry swamp buffalo because they disturbed its nap. Well, actually, it was all Alaric's fault. He fell into its swamp and woke it up. So rude of him. This buffalo is so angry. It also has glowing red eyes and gills. Terrifying. So they're just being chased through the jungle, working together to throw magical weapons at it. It's nice to see them fight together against something rather than each other, because we get to see how their opposing magical abilities sort of complement each other. The swamp buffalo eventually gives up the chase, and Alaric is just covered in mud, dripping wet, just a drenched goth. And Taliesin takes one look at him and bursts out laughing, and Alaric is just, let me read this quote for you. I would give anything, he thought, for this not to be the last time. For her to smile at me again and laugh like the war never happened. If this was what it took for her to stop being angry with him, then perhaps being covered in mud wasn't so terrible. What if I simply passed away? What then? This man is whipped. There is no other word for it. He's like all grumpy because clearly every single animal in Nenevar is out to get him. First that dragon, now this angry swamp bull, and then Taliesin just goes, I mean, it's not just the animals who are out to get you here. Girl! Taliesin, though, is equally gone because when he strips out of his wet clothes, her brain just kind of short circuits. She very meticulously sets up camp and doesn't so much as glance in his direction because he's wearing the least amount of clothing she's ever seen him in, and her mind was simply not built to process that image. Girl, I've been there. Alaric notices her avoiding his gaze, but since he's equally stupid in all matters of seduction, he just has no idea how to interpret her behavior. Both of these idiots think the other still loathes them. and both of them are starting to pine. Just a little. It's excellent. Alaric does something very surprising though. He mumbles out an apology for the way he treated her on his ship the other day, and as he's apologizing to her, he's realizing that his father would literally throw a gasket if he ever found out he was saying the word sorry, especially to the Lightweaver. Harris might actually kill him. And he finds that he doesn't care because his dad is a whole ocean away and he can never know. And that's oddly freeing. Okay, so I can see that without his father breathing down his neck, Alaric is kind of a different person. Or rather, he is the person he actually is deep down. This is who he is when he doesn't have to be the Night Emperor or the son of a tyrant. There's a really charming, funny, carefree sort of side to him that's emerging here. His energy is very much reminiscent of the 5 minutes of Ben Solo content we got at the end of Tross. Just the nonchalance, the shoulder shrug, that's who Alaric really is. I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, Ben Solo is the original blueprint for Alaric's character, so it's not surprising to me that he would have some of the same personality traits. Also, side note, nobody writes Ben Solo better than Thea Guanzon. That's the hill I'll die on. But yeah, it's just so nice to see this side of him. The sad part is that his current life circumstances just aren't allowing him to be that person. But I'm hoping we'll get to see more of the real him as the story goes along, because it's honestly really compelling to watch him play off of Taliesin like this. And with that, I think I'll end this part of the vlog right here. I just have the last 20% of the book to get through, and I'm really excited to see how it all ends. I'll catch you guys later. Bye. Hi! I feel like now is the time for me to mention that I work a full-time corporate job, and I've basically gotten no work done this week, especially in the last couple of days because all of my attention has been on this book. I simply have not been able to put it down long enough for me to be any sort of productive at the job that I'm being paid actual money for. It's just like December 2019 all over again when I was reading the original fanfic. Nothing has changed. Time is a flat circle. And I regret nothing. So I have finished the book. A lot has happened. I have many thoughts, some of which I'll save for the spoiler version of the review at the end of this video. But for now, what I will say is Thea Guanzon is truly one of the best authors of our time. And that's the truth that I'm holding space for in this bookish world. So let's discuss what went down in the last fifth of this book. Because again, I have the visceral need to discuss with someone, and you guys are right there. So let's go. Alaric and Taliesin reach the Lightsever at the top of the mountain. Something has definitely changed between the two of them since the swamp buffalo incident. They are both jumping out of the skin every time they so much as look at each other. The ancient Lightweaver temple is of course in ruins. Remember, they ruined the ruins earlier in the book. But there are carvings still intact throughout the temple, dedicated to the old gods of Nenevar, from the time before the Dragon Queens ruled. Alaric points out that people here don't seem to worship any gods like they do on the continent. They worship her grandmother. Taliesin is quick to correct him, no, they don't pray for my grandma, they just have to do whatever she says. And Alaric goes, oh, and I suppose I'll have to do that once I'm your husband? Because husbands obey their wives here. Alaric mentioning that he'll be her husband soon is doing very funny things to Taliesin's stomach. It feels all light and fluttery. What's with that? He spends this entire trip teasing her, making all these little quips about how the animals in this country are out to get him. He just keeps making her bite back smiles. What's with that? She's supposed to loathe him. Taliesin is very quickly realizing that her future husband is actually very hot, especially when he climbed dripping wet out of a stream to wash the mud off of him, and then his wet undershirt clung to his torso. Yeah, she had to hide her face from him. It was burning in a way that had nothing to do with the tropical heat. He's unexpectedly so funny and charming, and that makes it so much worse for her, because she hasn't forgotten that he'd called her shrewish, so he clearly doesn't feel the same. He's not feeling the same attraction she is. He only finds her pretty when she's all done up. That's what he told her, so it must be true. All of this makes her feel small. When did she start caring so much about how he saw her? They make camp there at the temple. The Lightsever so far hasn't activated yet, but they need to stay close by so she can catch it when it does. They wake up early the next day so Alaric can continue teaching Taliesin to make the light shield. Oh, we got a durian mention. Well, it's not named. It's just described as a fruit that can clear a room when it's cut open. Yeah, the coffee they're drinking smells like durian. I didn't know durian scented coffee was a thing that exists. But for their sake, I hope the coffee tastes like durian. If you know, you know. Okay, I'll explain for the uninitiated. Durian is a fruit from Southeast Asia. It smells like wet socks or raw sewage, but it tastes like vanilla custard. She contains multitudes, it's true. Alaric, however, is unimpressed by the swill that passes for calf in this sector. Real ones will get that reference. So he and Taliesin are slowly falling into an easy sort of camaraderie. He is also taking as many opportunities as he possibly can to rile her up. Yeah, I said it before and I'll say it again. This man's kink is making his girl mad. And Taliesin is totally starting to catch on to this, by the way. She finally just asks him if he just enjoys making her want to kill him. He gets so flustered at being called out like this that he just stares down into his durian-scented coffee. Because it is unlike anything he's ever had, his relationship with her. Everyone else in his life, other than his deranged father, sees him as their superior. They're like bowing and scraping to him. They don't see him as an equal. Like even Severim, who is his bestie, even he knows where the lines are drawn. Taliesin is the one person on this planet who doesn't kiss up to him, and that's honestly kind of refreshing. And he tells her as much, to which she replies, well, if you ever feel like being disrespected, hit me up. And that literally has him internally giggling and kicking his feet. Again, they are so different with each other out here. Like, this is who they get to be outside of the confines of politics and being the heads of their respective nations. They're just two shy virgins in the middle of the jungle who are quickly discovering that their future spouse is very hot. Alaric's inner Ben Solo out in full force today. He's so much lighter without the weight of his father and his empire on his shoulders. He just has the sauce? Like he's gently poking fun at her. He like chucks her under the chin at one point. Taliesin.x fully stops working when he does that, by the way. Her brain can't function. Taliesin is still having trouble making a shield. She just can't get her mind to really focus. But Alaric is patient. So much more patient than Edith Vela had ever been when she was training her. And that makes her feel a certain way. It makes her feel safe, even though she keeps messing up. I talked about this a little bit before, but I really do love that Taliesin isn't some goddess who immediately gets everything right on the first try. She's a naturally gifted light weaver, yes, but she's also not instantly a master. We get to see how she struggles to control her power and all of the complex emotions that come along with it, and that makes her feel relatable. She feels like a real person who could exist, even though we're in a fantasy world. Also, I love how Alaric encourages her to be competent. He's like, my wife is going to be strong and capable the way I know she can be. That's a man. It has to be said. Although from a strategic perspective, probably not the best idea to encourage your enemy to be competent, because they might just use that to take you down someday. The details behind Ethermancy, as explained by Alaric, are super detailed, super interesting. It expands the lore. Like, you can tell that Thea gave this a lot of thought, and I think that's really neat. So Alaric and Taliesin practice together, and I really loved the prose here. She and Alaric moved together, seamless and in fluid tandem, as though they were each other's mirrors. As though they were waves in an ocean called forever, their shadows lengthening on the stone. That's poetry, no other way to describe it. Eventually, with a lot of gentle instruction from Alaric, Taliesin finally forms a shield made of light. It's a small one, but it's a shield, and that's what matters. She is so happy when this happens. She's like a little sunbeam herself, and Alaric is so soft here when he praises her that she's doing so well. The euphoria is just overwhelming, so she hugs him. She actually throws her arms around his neck and hugs him. Alaric, fully taken aback, but he just kind of crushes her to him and doesn't let go. You can just tell how touch-starved they both are in this moment, because that hug seemingly lasts until sundown. Just the longest hug ever. They're absolutely just kind of melting into each other for like an hour. Both of their single brain cells are pretty much scrambled after that. You could eat them with buttered toast, that's how scrambled they both are. They're flustered, blushing messes, and I'm like so grateful to be witnessing this, especially when we consider how they started out. The whole next chapter is just them bonding, telling each other stories as they camp out and wait for the lightsaber to activate. It's so sweet seeing them form the beginnings of a real friendship, and honestly something more at this point. There's a moment where Taliesin's like, sorry you had to miss out on your better options for a wife, like sorry you're stuck with me. And Alaric goes, well, I never actually planned on getting married. There weren't any other options, and there never will be. You'll be the only woman in my life once we're married. Alaric Asenest, husband of the year. He really told his girl that he'll always be faithful to her, and she doesn't have to worry about being dishonored like that, which is good because every time she imagines him smiling, his rare half smile at any other woman, something in her chest kind of cracks. And why is that? Care to share with the class? Alaric later suggests that they spar, and maybe that'll help get her mojo back, because she's still having trouble making shields consistently, so she agrees. Oh my god, he asks her if he should go easy on her, because it's been a while. Are they still talking about sparring? Because it really sounds like something else. She tells him to have at it, old man. She really called him daddy. I just can't. She has also stripped off her shirt, by the way. She's just in her breastband and skin-tight leggings. May the gods have mercy on Alaric's soul, because he is suffering. The banter is god tier while they're fighting, and like always, Alaric can't help but get a rise out of Taliesin, but the vibe is very different this time. Like it's tinged with warmth and playfulness. He's not cold and distant like all the other times. They are both having the time of their life right now, fighting with each other. It's just like old times, except now they are also yearning to an insane degree. It's exhilarating, it's everything they've been wanting since they saw each other again. The chance for a rematch, the chance to fight someone whose magic is their direct opposite. The choreography of this fight scene is almost exactly like a dance. They're literally chest to chest. They're in this sort of hypnosis, just drawn to each other. It's just pure magnetism. It's light clashing against dark. It's the flickering of their crossed blades. And then they kiss. I was literally sweating reading this kiss scene. That's how steamy it was. They literally kiss over their crossed shadow and light blades. It's such an aesthetic. Like, this is what that Tross lightsaber fight between Kylo Ren and Rey would have been if it had the sauce. Side note, they absolutely should have kissed in that scene, dripping wet while the lightsabers are like sparking against each other, because that would have slayed. But we have this now, so I'm not as pressed anymore. By the way, neither Taliesin nor Alaric have kissed anyone before in their life, so they're clumsy and unpracticed, but it doesn't matter. The sexual tension in the scene goes crazy. They're just so pent up from everything that's happened so far. They kiss like they fight, just frenzied and unrelenting, and kind of a little angry too. And both of them want to be sweet with each other. Like, that's the one thing they so desperately crave, that tenderness. They want to be loved so bad, but they just aren't there yet. There's a whole war's worth of history behind them, but that's starting to change now. Yeah, this kiss scene, 100 out of 10. I have nothing more to say other than, I need them to kiss a million more times. Spare more kiss scenes, please, Miss Thea? Unfortunately, the lightsaber chooses that moment to activate, so they have to stop kissing. The description of it is honestly really magical. It's basically a pillar of sunlight that explodes into the sky. So the Lightweaver Temple, the way it's engineered, it's pretty interesting. Apparently the Lightweavers who built it constructed a fountain around the tears in the fabric of reality where the lightsaber actually flows through. So it looks like a fountain of light. Very cool bit of world building there. Taliesin approaches the lightsaber. She's a little nervous, a little unsure, because it's literal sun energy. It might burn her or something. So she turns to Alaric for reassurance. And it's basically this scene. And I love it so much. Alaric is, well, first of all, he's reeling from their kiss, but also from the way that she looked at him just now, because no one had ever looked at him like that before. Everyone else just sees him as this fearsome Shadow King. To enter a lightsaber was to dive headfirst into an ocean of sunshine, and it was wonderful. Why did I suddenly think of this image? I don't know. Taliesin enters the Pillar of Light, which is actually made up of billions of fine golden strands that sound like music to her soul, and from each string a memory comes forth. So all of these long forgotten memories come rushing back to her from various points in her life. But at the end, she sees Alaric as he'd been at the last battle on the continent. The shadows are whirling all around him. That same blood-red eclipse is there. His own blade is dripping with the blood of all the people he's just killed. He's that man from her nightmares again. He's not the man who's waiting for her outside the lightsaber, the one who kissed her senseless only a moment ago. All of this reminds her of Sardovia and all the people who are currently depending on her, and the fact that they all might die at the hands of Kesseth if they're ever found out. She asks the light to show her how to conjure a shield, and it does. This was such a magical scene. It felt very ethereal. It kind of a little bit reminded me of the great Shanaki scene from Song of the Sea, which, as some of you might know, is one of my favorite movies ever. Just the way that both scenes involve magical threads that hold stories and memories, which aid their respective heroes and their journey, which I thought was just really lovely. Alaric is watching the whole thing go down with like this mixture of dread and awe. Like he's been taught his whole life that light is bad. It burns everything in his path and leaves nothing behind. He should hate it. He should hate her, but he doesn't. And as the light pillar fades, Taliesin emerges golden and victorious with like a blazing shield of light in her hands. And all Alaric can think in this moment is that she is beautiful. No other thoughts going on in his brain at this time. and it's everything to me. Unfortunately for Alaric, Taliesin is giving him the cold shoulder again because communing with the Lightsever forced her to reckon with the truth, and the truth is that her betrothed is a killer. He's destroyed countless lives, and if she's not careful, he'll destroy her and everything she holds dear. Just horrified that she let him kiss her and touch her the way he did, and worse, that she liked it, so she just ignores him the rest of the day. Poor Alaric. He's just so blindsided. Like, what did I do? Well, everything apparently. But he gives her some space regardless. Neither of them can fall asleep that night. It's just the two of them under the stars, the memory of their kiss burning between them. Taliesin is thinking about her mom, and that if she continues to commune with the Lightsever, maybe she can uncover more memories about her. Alaric snootily tells her that he can practically hear the gears of her mind churning, so clearly sleep is off the menu for both of them tonight. They have some really heartfelt conversations about their mothers, about feeling alone growing up because they'd felt abandoned by their families, although in vastly different ways. Also, in this chapter, I came across the most Reylo line of all. It was as though a hand were reaching out to hold hers all across the wasteland years. It really is two lonely children who find each other as lonely adults, but are separated by the circumstances of their lives. In this case, by war and political strife. Taliesin also tells Alaric about Keda, who at this point is still missing, and then she remembers that it's because of him. And even worse, she realizes that when she visited her Sardovian friends the other day, she didn't even think to ask about Keda, if they'd heard from her or not. It's like she'd unknowingly given her friend up as dead. This is when Taliesin decides she's done talking to Alaric. He's the reason Keda is in this situation, and she's starting to spiral in despair over her friend. But Alaric doesn't let her off easy. He's like, well, what about that kiss? We should probably talk about that. But all Taliesin says is that it was a mistake. She just got carried away. It wasn't real, and it won't happen again. Girl! No! Poor Alaric. That definitely hurts him because he just snarls out that the feeling is mutual. Is it though? Pro tip for all you readers out there. You need not ever visit a circus again, because you have all the clownery you need from the couple in this book. Incredibly, both of them think that the other is telling the truth, that the kiss meant nothing to them. And they're both feeling like sick to their stomach at the thought of it. Taliesin is still thinking of the way he said that she's only pretty when she's all dressed up. Otherwise, she's a cave troll to him, clearly. They both get no sleep at night. The next morning, Taliesin decides to end their little jungle jaunt. This line killed me. Alaric was genuinely worried as to what other acts of idiocy he would commit if he stayed any longer on this mountain, alone with his betrothed and her accursed freckles. Yeah, Taliesin, sis, I can confidently say that he thinks you're hot no matter what you're wearing, or not wearing. Alaric is both furious and regretful here, because he'd let himself become vulnerable around someone who will never forget the past. He will not let it happen again. Trust! Yeah, both of them are going through it. They started out so well, and they miss that. They miss something that barely began. There's no indication that it'll ever be that way again, because they're still enemies at the end of the day. They're still on opposite sides. They return to the palace. G.A. hurls Taliesin into a marble bathtub on sight. She just can't fathom her princess traipsing around jungles. It's too much. Girlie, just wait till you find out how your princess grew up. It's not pretty. And the whole time Taliesin's sitting in that bathtub, she's thinking about her friend Keda and how she'd failed her. The day of the eclipse dawns. Remember earlier in the book, they'd practiced making their combined barrier and the Daya Ishan almost killed them? And they were like, oh, our magic only works together when there's an eclipse? Yeah, so there's an eclipse today, so they try again. And this time they're successful, but the whole time they're just doing their best not to breathe in each other's directions. Taliesin is of course dressed once again in all of her finery, and as good as she looks, she's not that scrappy girl that Alaric was training in the jungle. She's the princess of Nenevar once again, and he misses that wilder side of her the most. Yeah, Taliesin, this man lied to you, okay? He loves looking at you even when you're drenched in sweat from hiking up a mountain all day. Taliesin is just completely ignoring him, and it's making him so sad. He's like seconds away from bursting into tears. Oh, my son. Ishan brought some sort of amplifying machine that's powered by Saruman blood. She explains to Alaric that they don't actually kill the birds to extract it. In fact, killing any magical creature is against Nenevarine law. This makes Alaric think of the animal that's on his house's seal, the Chimera, which is another magical creature. They were once plentiful on the continent, but have since been hunted basically to extinction, and the last sighting of one was over a century ago. So Alaric's like wondering if he can enact a similar law, because it would be nice to see a Chimera in his lifetime. And it's a shame that his people killed them all. I thought this was very Zuko with the dragons in that Sun Warrior episode, for no reason at all. I hope my son Alaric gets to see a chimera one day. He deserves good things. So Alaric and Taliesin successfully recreate their magical barrier. The amplifying machine makes their barrier big enough to encompass the entire palace, which amazes everyone watching, especially Alaric. This is the first time he's seeing Neneverine tech and how advanced it is, and he has the same thought that Taliesin did earlier. This is what a nation not at war can achieve. Things can be created, not lost. And Taliesin sees that exact moment of realization dawning on his face, and she tells him she understands. Like, this is what a life of peace can do. And neither of them have ever known peace. While they're holding up their magical barrier, Taliesin actually briefly considers killing him. Like, it would be so easy if she did it now while he's distracted. She could pierce a light dagger through his heart and it would all be over. But not so easy now, actually. Because when she looks at him, she sees so many things. She sees the monster who killed her people, but also the man who'd chucked her under the chin the other day, and teased her, and given her tiny, almost smiles, and kissed her like a man starved. I looked at him and saw myself. So she stays her hand and literally chuckles to herself and goes, I'm in danger. Ishan is very pleased with their magic. In 5 months, all 7 moons will disappear and the Void Sever will unleash its fury on the world. So her team will have to come up with a stronger amplification device to contain it, but this is a good start. They just have to keep practicing their magic together until then, or everyone dies. Just your average day at the office. Speaking of being together, their wedding is almost here, so everyone's just hammering out all these last minute details. The subject of their consummation comes up again, and they both feel like they're going to be violently ill. Oh, okay, so you two are just going to sit there and pretend you didn't already start that process back at the lightsaber. Cool. Very cool. Apparently, Taliesin is bringing a dowry into this marriage. It's a castle with its own private island, and it'll be their shared home until Taliesin ascends the throne and she has to live at the roof of heaven full time. Rudaha's like, it'll be good for Aluncina to learn the domestic arts. She's never run a household. Yeah, I imagine being a penniless soldier doesn't lend much experience with that. This is like the most acknowledgement of her past that she ever gets from her grandmother, by the way. I just thought it was funny that she says it in front of Alaric. Just in case he's expecting his future wife to be some sort of domestic goddess or something. She has to manage expectations here. Taliesin runs into one of the nobles the day before the wedding, and he tells her that she has his support for whatever comes after the whole Voidfell thing, including preventing the shadow from falling over the continent. Hint hint, nudge nudge. One thing I haven't really touched on is the web of politics in this book. There's definitely a lot going on in the background, especially with a lot of the nobles not really being for this marriage. I think it's interesting how a lot of them are expecting some shit to hit the fan after they stop the Void Sever from killing everyone. It's almost like they're expecting the peace treaty to not hold up. And this is with most of them being unaware that Nenevar is hiding the Sardovians. So it's kind of interesting that they're all still anticipating something happening, but what that is anyone's guess at this point. I think it really all hinges down to Alaric and Taliesin's relationship and how they navigate married life while being tied to different ideals. Or they think they're different ideals. More on that later. The day of the wedding arrives. While Taliesin's getting ready, Elagaby comes in and he's like crying. He's such a soft dad. He never got to see his daughter grow up, and now she's getting married, and it's a marriage none of them want, but they have to go through with it. I got a little emotional here. Taliesin still has one person in her corner who wants nothing but the best for her. Let's talk about Taliesin's wedding look. She's wearing all white with gold and silver thread embroidered. The whole thing is like studded with actual diamonds. She's also wearing diamonds on like the tips of her lashes, and she can't really see. It's giving this energy.
Oh, braces!
Yeah, I'm getting 2 diamonds put in.
Oh, that must make them more comfortable.
Imagine being so rich that your falsies are studded with gemstones. Couldn't be me. Alaric is waiting for her at the altar. There are so many flashing lights from all of the pictures, or ethergraphs I think the pictures are called, because they're powered by magic. He's like wondering, with all of these pictures being taken, if the news of his wedding will reach his mom, wherever she is, if she's even still alive. We get another flashback scene with him and his mom. He's much younger here, where his mom is telling him a sweet story of how couples propose to each other where she's from. Remember, she's not actually from Keseth. She was from another land far from the continent. It's such a cute scene. She calls him her little dove. baby Alaric asks her if Gaheris proposed to her in that same special way, all the cheeriness just evaporates out of her. She goes, "No, your father is Kessethes, and therefore wouldn't know love if it punched him in the face." I'm paraphrasing, by the way, she didn't quite say it like that, but she meant it. Okay, I have a theory about his mom, about Sansia, about what actually happened to her and where she might be now, because we absolutely haven't been told the whole story there. That's definitely something that's going to be addressed in the later books, because Sansia has been mentioned a not insignificant number of times at this point. I find Alaric's relationship with Sansia very similar to Zuko and his mom from Avatar, and I had spent a lot of time theorizing about what happened to Zuko's mom back in the day, so there's precedent for it. Anyway, yeah, I have thoughts on what the deal is with Alaric's mom, but I think I'll save it for the spoiler section of my review. So back to the wedding. The venue is stunning, so beautiful. It's in a tower in the capital city made entirely of stained glass. The wedding's being held at sunset. The altar is shaped like a giant dragon. What a vibe. It's so opulent and extra. Too bad nobody in the room actually wants to be there. Urduha and Alagbi are sitting there, and so are all the lords and ladies of the land, and some Kessethes officers. The officiant looks out at the crowd and goes, "I've seen happier faces at funerals." Damn. Alaric unfortunately agrees with her, but then Taliesin walks into the room, and he can't breathe suddenly. His future wife is so beautiful. Alaric.x has simply stopped working. He needs to be rebooted immediately. He takes one look at her and is struck absolutely dumb. This marriage is off to a great start. Taliesin, meanwhile, is trying not to fall flat on her ass because she's dragging this massive bridal train behind her, all while wearing tall heels on a slippery glass floor. Monumentally dumb idea, by the way. Everyone knows you should wear bedazzled sneakers underneath your wedding dress, but I don't think sparkly keds are a thing in Fantasy Philippines yet. Alaric helps her up the steps. He cannot help but tease her about the dress, the fact that she'll crack the glass floor with all the diamonds she's wearing, which just makes her even more flustered. "Alaric, please, you're supposed to tell her you think she looks like a beautiful star plucked from the night sky. I know you're thinking it." I loved the ceremony, the meaning behind all the rituals, the way both of them fumbled through their vows, because they both desperately want to mean what they're saying, but this marriage is a farce. They have to hold hands at one point. I think it's actually the first time they do that, and it's like a live current running between them. It's the Reylo hand touch scene from TLJ on steroids. Alaric's hands are not covered by gauntlets. He's going through it, lads. He is so incredibly starved for touch that merely holding her hand like this is making him feel crazy. They can both feel their magic kind of humming under the surface of their skin, and when they touch their hands together, it has this soothing effect on each other. For example, Alaric instantly feels warm where Taliesin is touching his hand. It's like sunlight is just flooding through him, and it feels really nice, because shadows are cold and dark, and he would like to be warm for once. It's this yin-yang sort of moment where their opposing magic is bleeding into each other, and is almost like a balm to their souls. It's that missing piece they never knew they needed. I loved everything about the scene. It's so poetic and full of impossible yearning. It's pure magnetism between Alaric and Taliesin here. Just chef's kiss. Speaking of kissing, it's time for them to kiss, because it's a royal wedding, and that's what the people want. And by people, I mean me. She leans up, intending to give him a quick peck, but his lips are just so soft and warm like mashed potato. And he leans down to chase after her mouth, because boy does not want it to be a quick peck, actually. He even pulls her closer to him. Careful, Alaric. Your feelings are showing. They are both so wrecked after they part. Time is not real. They're both so dazed and disoriented after locking lips one time. Her ears were ringing, and it took her an embarrassing amount of time to figure out that it was due to actual gongs. That's how out of it they both are. And yet, they both still think the other feels nothing for them. Alaric's face is so stoic the entire wedding scene because he is desperately trying to get his one brain cell to function in front of the prettiest girl he's ever seen in his life. But Taliesin mistakes this for indifference. Later on the way back to the palace, she catches Alaric staring at her, and she assumes he thinks it's because she looks ridiculous in her wedding dress. And it's just so funny because, girl, he was ogling your chest. He was fully enjoying the view, and also lamenting the fact that he's attracted to his wife. May the gods help him. Imagine if these fools actually talked about their feelings for a second. But they can't. They're emotionally constipated virgins who are also enemies, who are also spouses. There's just too much going on here with them. At their reception ball, Taliesin starts to curtsy to Urduha, but is stopped by her dad. because she's the Night Empress now, and the Empress is outranked only by her husband. There's been a power shift, and Urduha is not happy about it. She's like welcoming Alaric into the family in the driest tone of voice ever. I'm guessing my girl Urduha didn't fully think through the implications of this marriage. Just a feeling. Also, Ilagvi tells Alaric to take care of his daughter in the most cheerfully threatening way possible. Again, Dad of the Year, I love him so much. Take notes, Geharis, you piece of junk. I hope you get blown out of the sky. So Alaric and Taliesin are supposed to do a little dance, a little waltz, if you will. The dance scene is so funny because it's less of a dance and more like a weird tug of war, because both of them think that they're supposed to lead. Fun fact, in Nenevar, the women lead the dances and the men get to be swept along. Alaric unfortunately wasn't made aware of this fact, so everyone watching is just kind of giggling to themselves. But eventually he lets her lead, and something shifts. The dance is kind of second nature to them. In many ways, dancing is like fighting, but at least no one's in danger of being stabbed this time, so there's that. It's a very charged moment, especially in the context of how they began doing these same moves on the battlefield as enemies, but this time they're newlyweds in a ballroom. They're like ousted from the reception in the politest way possible, because it's that time of the night, folks. Time to get jazzy. GA makes Taliesin wear an interesting nightgown. And by interesting, I mean completely non-existent, because there is basically no fabric. It's just the sheerest garment known to man. To Taliesin's complete and utter horror, GA tells her that she can't wear anything else. There's no time to change anyway because Alaric is right outside her door now. Okay, isn't her Princess Tyrese 2 royal engagement closet right there though? Can't she just hop in there and change? Unless there's like a tradition of locking the closet on the princess on the night of her wedding, so she's just stuck in lingerie all evening. But Taliesin has to wear it anyway because she needs to convince everyone that she indeed spent the night with her husband. And that includes GA, so GA 1, Taliesin 0. GA is so cute, by the way. She passes Alaric on her way out and just gives him the sauciest grin ever by telling him that the princess is ready for him. She really said, I'm loyal to the princess only, and you're just her consort. I don't need to bow and scrape to you. An icon. Alaric goes in, sees Taliesin dressed as that, and nearly blacks out. She's like snarling at him, daring him not to say a single word about her current state of dress, or lack thereof. She's also blushing at the same time though, which just makes Alaric suffer infinitely more. He's also feeling a little self-conscious, because remember, there are 2 shy virgins in this mess. He's particularly thinking about how his nose is too big. I don't think his nose is too big. I think it's just right. He's like looking anywhere but at her, asking for extra bedding so he can sleep on the floor. And Taliesin's like, wait, no, just sleep in my bed with me. It's big enough. It's just for one night. How hard could it be? Things can be very hard, in fact. She's explaining to him how they need to make it look like they slept together, otherwise people will talk, including but not limited to the blacksmith washerwoman 3 towns away. The people want smut. She's like, might as well go along with it, at least on the surface. We gotta take the path of least resistance. To which Alaric immediately kind of takes offense to, because it seems like she's been taking the path of least resistance with everyone but him. And he just calls her out on it because he's annoyed and confused and extremely sexually frustrated. He just wants peace, but he has only problems. He very snidely tells her that she has to be told what to do all the time. She lets her grandmother walk all over her, and even about how she went back and fought for Sardovia instead of claiming back her birthright just because Edith Vela asked her to, which makes Taliesin furious. She accuses him of doing the same, of being his father's puppet, because he did admit to her that he still has to answer to Geharis, even though he's the Night Emperor. And then she goes in for the kill. She says she feels sorry for him because he has 2 masters now, his father and herself, because they're in Nenevar, and here husbands obey their wives. And this is Alaric's last straw. They're both fully gearing up for an actual physical fight. And if you're wondering if they end up in a tussle, they do, but in a different way. You think Alaric's about to strike her, but he ends up kissing her instead. I'm going to kill you with my lips on yours. Of course he did. He's horny beyond belief. I'm surprised there's any oxygen left for his single brain cell. All of his blood has flown south by now. We did it, Joe. We finally got our long-awaited sex scene, and it's everything. I'm not sure how detailed I want to go into this, but I will say they definitely don't end up going all the way. And I'm glad for that. They just aren't there yet on an emotional level. And even though they don't do the deed, it's still one of the best smut scenes I've ever read in published fiction. Smut is definitely another one of Thea's strengths, which is totally a flex, okay? Writing good smut is hard. Like, that's a skill that takes time to master, just like writing action or fight scenes, because it's just so choreography heavy. You have to be aware of their physical movements at all times. It has to flow, it has to make sense. It has to be immersive enough for the reader to feel like they're intruding on a private moment. This scene was perfectly balanced between the physical and the emotional, and it also served to strengthen Alaric and Talison's bond, even as it's in danger of fraying, as we saw from their argument. They start out angrily kissing, but eventually they just sort of melt into each other. You can really feel their mutual loneliness and desire to be held throughout the scene. There's this one really sweet moment where Taliesin reminds Alaric that he'd essentially called her ugly. Like, she makes it known to him that she was hurt by that. But Alaric straight up tells her that he was lying. It was all a lie, because he always thinks she's beautiful, even when she wants to murder him. It's giving, you're beautiful when you're angry, and I need a moment. Actually, I need 5 business days to recover from reading this scene, because how am I supposed to move on from that? Well, the next book comes out very soon, so that's what I'm clinging to in these trying times. Alaric is so possessively tender. He calls her Tala, which to him is just like a cute nickname, but it's actually the Nenevarine word for star, so it makes her feel all of the emotions. Taliesin has an endearment kink, confirmed. He also calls her his wet little wife. The people died. Unfortunately, post-nut clarity is a real thing. They're both like floating back down to earth after. Alaric's like trying to snuggle her, but Taliesin then remembers all of the people who are counting on her, both Nenevar and Sardovia, and that he's still her enemy who will come after her friends, and that she's going to betray him someday. She thinks she's just made a horrible mistake. It's just like their kiss at the light sever, except infinitely worse, because they're both in far more compromising positions, and she feels all the more guilty for giving in to her desires for a man who hates her, and who she's supposed to hate in return. Girl, I can tell you right now, there's a word for what that boy feels for you, but it is not hate. But I get it. I get where she's coming from. I might not be happy about it, but I get it. So she makes Alaric sleep on the floor after all. Poor guy. He wanted snuggles, but got only struggles. Both of them are wrecked the next morning. They can't get the memory of last night out of their heads, and they both know they're kind of past the point of no return here, but they just don't know how to deal with their emotions in a remotely healthy way. And it makes sense given the context of how they were raised. Neither of them know what a healthy relationship looks like. I just feel sad for them. For my son Alaric especially, he really is full on panicking. She was so beautiful, and he couldn't get out of Nenevar fast enough, absolutely going through it. Yeah, Alaric's leaving today. He's going back to the continent, and Taliesin will follow him in a couple weeks to be officially crowned the Night Empress. Speaking of being the Night Empress, Urduha summons her later, initially just to make sure that neither of them actually killed each other on their wedding night, but also to tell her that she can't hide the Sardovians forever. Urduha doesn't believe that Edith Fella's forces can actually take back the continent. They just don't have that power. And Nenevar now has a mutual defense treaty with Keseth, so they would be bound by her marriage to ally with Keseth if the Sardovians attack. So that complicates things. But if Taliesin keeps her end of the deal, if she keeps her head down and is a good little princess without making a fuss, i.e. she doesn't continue practicing her magic and visiting the light sever, as long as she doesn't get distracted by her husband's pretty face, Urduha is willing to continue hiding the Sardovians. Basically, her grandmother is trying to guilt trip her into remaining under her control by dangling her friend's safety over a cliff. But Taliesin remembers what Edith Vela had told her, that she wasn't alone anymore. She has Alaric, she's his Night Empress, and that she's her grandmother's only claim to the throne. So she reminds Grammy of that little detail. She's tired of being played as a pawn, so she finally tells Urduha how it's going to be from now on. She asks for freedom to practice her magic, and to move within Nenevar however she pleases. Like, she wants to see firsthand how things are being run, and she can't do that being stuck in a gilded palace. Urduha finally relents. She just goes very well in the frostiest tone imaginable. She's lost this time, but she's still the Dragon Queen, so I'm sure that's not the last time we'll ever see her trying to play the Game of Thrones. I'm glad Taliesin finally stood up to her grandma, because that woman is a piece of work, I tell you. And then it's time for our favorite lovebirds to say goodbye, at least for a little while. It's a very public event, by the way. All the nobles and servants are like standing by watching with popcorn. Alaric's like, you should probably cry a little and beg me not to leave. Otherwise the blacksmith's washerwoman 3 towns away will be disappointed. Oh my son, your Ben Solo is showing. Reel it in before Taliesin falls for you. Taliesin's like, about last night, you agree that it was a mistake, right? Like, it was just biology? Alaric's like, yeah. Of course it was. We just got carried away. It was a natural biological reaction. No reason to overthink it. It wasn't real. Reader, he very much overthought it. He very much thought it was real. They're both like reassuring each other that it'll never happen again. But internally, they're both having like a breakdown because they very much want it to happen again. I swear to God, these two buffoons, they're going to give me an aneurysm. But then Alaric just sees how Taliesin looks so small and sad, and something just stirs in his chest. To his very great alarm, by the way. What is this? Am I having a heart attack? So he offers to find out where Kata is, if she's still alive, and have her brought back to the Kessethes capital so that Taliesin can meet with her. And Taliesin asks if she can actually bring Kata back to Nenevar with her, which technically Kata is a prisoner of war, so freeing her would raise some eyebrows. But whatever, he's the emperor. Maybe he can make it a wedding gift to her. A grand gesture of peace. Hey wife, here's your long-lost pregnant best friend who we decided not to torture and kill today. Before Alaric leaves, the Voidfell Sliver flares open, the sky turns purple, and everyone watching is immediately nervous. It's like the planet itself was trying to remind them that they're all going to die soon if they don't get their shit together. Especially Taliesin, her lovely smile is gone, she looks so afraid, and Alaric has to leave, right now, before he offers to fight the Voidfell with his bare fists or something. That's how gone this man is. For his little wife, Alaric goes back home to the Kessethes capital. I don't know what Kesseth looks like, the home of the Shadow Daddies. We haven't spent any time here, and there isn't that much in the book to go off of, but I imagine it looks something like the Night Court from that Sarah J. Maas book. Akutar. That's the one. A disclaimer, I've never read a Sarah J. Maas book in my life, but I always see those AI generated images of like all the different courts from all of the Bookstagram accounts I follow, and they're all obsessed with the Night Court aesthetic, so that's what I picture when I think of Kesseth. I've been influenced by the Akutar girlies. I love that the first thought Alaric has when he returns to the palace is, Taliesin would find it a bit too dark here. I'll have to give her the rooms with the most sun. Otherwise she'll get sad. My boy is in love. Gaheris is in a strangely gleeful mood. Alaric's like, what's happening? I thought you were going to punish me the minute I walked through that door. But we find out why. Apparently, Matthier, Alaric's right hand, that older general from his grandfather's time, she's stolen a Saruman bird from Nenevar and brought it back to Kesseth. The poor bird is so sad to be so far from home, but Gaheris, having the time of his life plotting the most evil schemes. He is planning for the shadow to fall over Nenevar. They're going to rule both the continent and the islands. And it's going to start with getting rid of that Lightweaver's magic, Taliesin's magic. And Alaric can only stand there and watch in slow horror because Gaheris is cracked. Well, that's the end of the book. Wait, I lied. Hold on. There are those two bonus scenes, but that's where we officially leave off, with a deranged lunatic planning yet another genocide. I enjoyed both of the bonus scenes. The one that's in the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition is basically just Alaric immediately after the sex scene, him in his post-nut haze, and how he wishes they had both gone further, but also that it hadn't happened at all. Poor boy is so horny and lovesick and confused. He is never going to be at peace again, that's for sure. I kind of wish the scene was just in the book itself. I think it would have flowed better if we had this insight in chronological order, but it was a nice scene from his POV. I really felt for him there. The Fairy Loot Edition's bonus scene is actually from Severim's POV. Now we're getting saucy. It's basically various scenes from the war, starting from when Alaric limps back from his first encounter with Taliesin out on that frozen lake, and Severim finds him concussed and bleeding. He's like, who did this to you? Nobody's ever done this much damage to you. A girl. What? What girl? And pretty much from then on, we see how Alaric becomes obsessed with finding the girl who stabbed him with a blade of light, which Severim finds interesting, because Alaric has never shown any interest in any women before. So what's with this girl? We get some juicy info. Apparently many court ladies and legionnaires threw themselves at Alaric in the past, but were all denied access to the goods. Again, because he was just too committed to the dark side. And also his father forbade him from touching anyone. He wanted a weapon, not a son. But yeah, Alaric is weirdly locked in whenever the Lightweaver is mentioned. And why does he relax ever so slightly when he finds out his forces were unable to kill her again? At the last battle, the one where Sardovia officially loses, Alaric stops Severine from killing Taliesin and those crazy twin girls. Remember, they're part of Alaric's goth boy band? The twins are like, it's only natural for the prince to have the honor of killing the last Lightweaver. Justice for House Osenast. So it makes sense for him to want her all to himself. And Severine's just like, yeah, I'll just bet he does. Once again, Severine is the only person in this entire book with more than a single brain cell. Alright, that's it. I am done with this book. It was truly a wild ride from start to finish, but I'll talk more about that in my official review. For now, I need to sit down. I need to process everything that I just read. I need an iced mocha latte, fam, as a treat. So I'll go do that. Hi! I'm guessing if you made it to this part of the video, you're at least somewhat interested in hearing my thoughts on this book. As promised, I won't be going to spoilers for this part of the review, and I'll clearly indicate below when I will start talking spoilers. So, I read a published Reylo fanfic. I read The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon, and it melted my brain in the best way. I will say though, this is not a romantasy for the faint of heart, in the sense that it goes hard into both the fantasy and the romance. So if you're more of a plain romance girly, and you don't typically read high fantasy with a lot of world building and lore, I don't think this is going to be the book for you. Like, I've seen so many TikTok reviews of this book where people are just like, it's just too many big words, and why haven't they kissed yet? I'm already halfway through the book. Even though it was marketed as a slow burn, enemies to lovers tale set in a fantasy world, and the first book in a trilogy. So like, not sure why people picked up a book featuring high fantasy, slow burn enemies to lovers, and getting annoyed that it actually committed to being a book featuring high fantasy slow burn enemies to lovers. Like, why are you out here reading romantasy and getting all shocked Pikachu whenever the fantasy comes on screen? I call this fourth wingitis. It's a disease where you read a book like Fourth Wing, which is marketed as romantasy, but it never really dives deep into either the fantasy or the romance aspect. It's just kind of equally lame at both. And then you're just conditioned to expect that same level of mediocrity in every romantasy. It's like ordering a sandwich from Subway, where they only give you like a couple slices each of meat and cheese. The vegetables are non-existent, and like the bread is made of yoga mat foam. And you're kind of hungry 2 hours later because they gave you a nothing sandwich. But that's your usual, so you're fine with it, versus going to the local deli that's been there since the Dark Ages and getting a premium, stacked sandwich with multiple layers of delicious food and real bread, just a full course meal in the palm of your hand. Like, you don't know what you're missing until you go and find that deluxe local place. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is, if you want a romantasy that actually commits to the genre, then you should read this book. Also, just a disclaimer, I'm not a Fourth Wing hater. I actually enjoyed the book in the same way I enjoy Twilight. Unironically. It's just pure, unserious fun. Like, I'm totally not trying to rain on your parade, or dump a monsoon over it, as it were, but by no stretch of the imagination would I ever call it a great romantasy. The world building is pretty non-existent at worst, and lackluster at best. The romance is truly so nonsensical in terms of pacing that it's actually just funny, which I don't think was the vibe that the author was going for at all. It's just not the best blend of the two genres that's out there. One day I'll do an excruciatingly in-depth review of Fourth Wing. One day. Comment below if that's something you want to see me do. So, going back to the Hurricane Wars, the world building is pretty intense. There are a lot of big words and hard to pronounce names, but they're repeated often enough in the book that you kind of start to remember what they are and make that connection yourself. But if you're still having trouble, I think most editions come with a glossary full of helpful terms, which is really great. Real ones know. Back in the day, all we had to go off of were the Wikipedia links way down at the bottom of each chapter. That was our glossary. In terms of world building, everything is very richly described. You're never going to have too much trouble picturing what's going on, because Thea's writing is very cinematic and makes it feel like you're almost watching what's happening rather than reading about it. The world itself is pretty unique. A lot of the imagery and lore is based off of Southeast Asian concepts and folktales, specifically the Philippines, because the author is Filipino, and that's something I haven't seen too much of before, so it was really fun to kind of immerse myself in this new world and learn all these new things. It's become one of my favorite fantasy aesthetics of all time. The vibes were so immaculate. The magic system is pretty cool. I wouldn't say that it's completely new, It's more of a fresh spin on concepts that most people are already familiar with, but there are some sci-fi elements, like with the technology and all, some of which I've never come across in a book before. The magic system and background lore is kind of like if Star Wars and Avatar: The Last Airbender had a baby, and I love that. Star Wars and Atla are both so special to me, so if it's the same way for you, then I think you're really going to enjoy this book. There's also a kind of Game of Thronesy vibe in all the politics going on here. Like, there's a lot of court intrigue and scheming and power plays, along with the bigger wars and the politics of all the different nations, which makes the romance even more impressive in the way that it's handled. You have these two people at the center of all of this, from opposing sides and opposing views on things, and opposing magical abilities. One has light powers, the other is a shadow daddy, and we love him for it. And the way they go from wanting to literally kill each other to shoving their tongues down each other's throats is done really well. It's a slow burn in the truest sense, but in the context of where they started and all the politics going on, it makes sense that it would take a long time for those more romantic feelings to develop. But the attraction is definitely there. Like, the stove is very much on, the flame is simmering steadily hotter as the book goes along, but it never gets too out of hand too quickly. The slow burn feels realistic. Like, you watch them go from the battlefield to the bedroom, and you believe it because you saw that natural progression over time. But just know that the tension between them is searing. You are going to feel crazy throughout this book's runtime because you want them to kiss so bad it's making you lightheaded. Also, what really helps the romance aspect is the prose. Very lyrical, almost like poetry at times. I've seen some negative reviews saying that it's too purple prosy for them, like it's too beautiful, but like, you're reading a romance? That's where you should be getting a little bit lavender in your wording, I think. I don't really get it. Romance is a deeply emotional genre. Wouldn't you want your prose to reflect that? Especially when you throw magic and fantasy into the mix. Like, this is the time to get a little more fanciful in your writing. I once read this historical romance book that, I kid you not, had this line in it regarding the main couple. He wanted her, but not sexually. Like, am I reading a story or am I reading a Wikipedia article? The artistry was just non-existent. I get reading something and being like, okay, this is doing a little too much. It's too sappy and earnest. But The Hurricane Wars is just not that book. The writing is stunning, but it's not over the top. My only real complaint is that I kind of wish this book wasn't split into a trilogy. I actually think it works better as a single giant book because the way it ends is a little abrupt. Like, it's a cliffhanger that goes straight into the next book. But that's just me going off of the original fic version of this, which was one giant story, and I didn't have to wait a whole year or two in between the sections. I get it, you make triple the money if you split it into 3 different books, so whatever, I'll let it slide. Also, The Hurricane Wars is new adult, it's not YA, so be warned, there is some spice here. It's not much, it's mostly at the end, but just warning you guys out there if you're not into that. So yeah, The Hurricane Wars, Infinity Stars for me. It was the perfect slow burn enemies to lovers romantasy. I said a few months ago that Thea Guanzon is one of the finest authors on this planet Earth, and after reading this book, I fully stand by that. Okay, I really want to start getting into some of the plot details, so just warning you now, here be spoilers. Okay, so I want to start off the spoiler review talking about Alaric and Talison's mothers. There's kind of a mystery surrounding both of them, but I'll start with Talison's. Her mom was Hanan Ivralis from the Dawn Isles. She was a light weaver, and she died sometime after giving birth. And it was also shortly before the Nenevarine Civil War, which separated Taliesin from her family for 19 years. What Taliesin remembers from that time is a woman promising her that they'll see each other again. Is that woman Hanan? Because by that point, she would have already been dead. Did she somehow survive? If you read the OG fanfic, you'll know that's not what happened. Like, she did die in that version, but this is a different book and the plot isn't exactly the same anymore, so she could be still alive. They say Hanan died from an illness and that she passed quickly, and I remember Alaric being like, what could have killed a light weaver like her? If she's dead, then she was definitely poisoned. The question is, by who? If that is the case, I'm fairly certain I know who it is, but I don't want to say it. It seems too spoilery even for this section, because I know a lot of you haven't read the original fanfic, so I don't want to ruin that. Let's talk about Alaric's mom now. Miss Sansia Asenast. She is the Zuko's mom of the story. She was a loving mother who doted on her son and was married to a literal monster. And like Zuko's mom, when things really started taking a turn for the worse, she fled the palace and was never seen again. As far as we've been told, Alaric's mom either left the continent and returned to her homeland on the other side of the world, or she was killed by her evil ghoul of a husband. But we do know that she left when Alaric was 13 years old. I think he's 26 now. Taliesin would have been about 6 or 7 at the time, and also by that point the Hurricane Wars had been going on for a few years. What I find really interesting is that Edith Vela, the leader of the Sardovian troops, also defected Kesseth around that time. Guys, I think Edith Vela is Sansia Asenast. Wait, walk with me here. Edith Vela is described as a woman older than Taliesin, but we don't know by how much. She's also from Kesseth. She has Shadow Daddy powers. I don't know if Sansia had powers too. I don't think that was mentioned. The timelines seem to add up, because at the beginning of the book, Edith Vela was said to have been with the Sardovians for about a decade, so she would have defected when Alaric was maybe 16. Okay, I realize there's a hole the size of 3 whole years in my theory. Maybe she ran away and joined the Kessethese army to try to stop them from the inside for a while, but when that didn't work, she stole some storm ships and joined the Sardovians. Okay, I know I sound bonkers, but there's something there. I just know it. For example, we've never seen Edith Vela and Alaric directly face each other. Like, Alaric knows Edith Vela exists, but I'm not sure he's ever seen her. I don't think he knows what she looks like, which feels significant to leave out because if they have met before, I feel like it would have been mentioned. Also, another thing, when Taliesin tells Edith that she's marrying Alaric, Edith, tells her she won't be alone, that she has Alaric. Now, why would Edith say something like that? It's like she's not concerned for Taliesin's safety because she's marrying Alaric. She's concerned for her safety because she'll be near Gaheris. Why would she not be concerned that Taliesin is marrying the Night Emperor unless she knew what he was really like? That he isn't a genocidal maniac like his dad? Because she's actually his mother, and he's her little dove. If I am right, that is some grade A family drama right there. That is a whole mess, and I'm so here for it. I'm so here for the angst. I can't wait to get to A Monsoon Rising and confirm if I'm either a genius or a crazy person. I'm also wondering what really happened to Taliesin, like who sent her airship to Sardovia and why. Because she was supposed to be sent to the Dawn Isles to stay with her mom's family until the Nenevarine Civil War was over. Also, what happened to Kata? I hope she's still alive. There's just so many questions. Luckily, I won't have to wait too long though, because A Monsoon Rising, the next book, is out December 10th, and I'm so excited for it. I'm like shaking. The Hurricane Wars was just so good, guys. An absolute banger. It really is one of my favorites ever. I'm really curious to see how Taliesin and Alaric are going to navigate their marriage going forward, especially because Taliesin is going to betray Alaric. She is helping hide the Sardovians, who are his enemies, and ultimately she doesn't think Kesseth should rule the continent. The really compelling thing about these two is that they are opposites on the surface. Like, their magic is light and dark, they're on opposite sides of the war, but they both want the same thing. They are both extremely lonely people who want to find belonging and be loved, but their status and power in society leaves them with few opportunities to do that. But when they get married, they suddenly have that chance to finally not feel so alone. But in the end, although they might want the same things, they have different views on how they should get there. I'm really interested to see how Taliesin learns to separate Alaric, her husband, from the man she used to fight on the battlefield. I think that'll be quite a journey. And I want to see how Alaric grows into his own person outside of his cracked dad's influence. I want to see how this Kylo Ren turns into Ben Solo. I don't want to call his arc a redemption arc because I don't think he needs to be redeemed. I just think he needs to become himself. Well, I have yapped collectively about this book for many days now, and I think I've said all I need to say. I loved the Hurricane Wars, and I think a lot of you will too. If you guys have also read it, let me know what you guys thought down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were there too many big words for you? By the way, if you hated it simply because it was a Reylo fanfic and tried to have it review bombed, I am so sorry that you lack taste. That's a you problem. Must be tough living in a sauceless world. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a fabulous holiday season. I'll be reading A Monsoon Rising next, so please stay tuned for that. I promise it'll be equally, if not more unhinged than whatever this video was. I'll see y'all next time. Bye!